Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Sumo is a fantastically simple sport to win. There's only really two win conditions. You either drive your opponent out of the doyo, the ring, or you take them to the ground. And when we say take them to the ground, any part of their body other than the soles of their feet which touches the ground, that counts as a loss. Now, how you do this can vary. It varies between wrestlers and their backgrounds and styles. Some will be more focused on the driving and the pushing. Some, particularly with the judo background, more focused on the throws. There is kind of a core of winning techniques, which we call kimarite, and they're kind of standard winning techniques. But realistically, any technique you use to get your opponent either out or down, you'll win the match.
But the two that we're seeing on the screen look actually quite lightweight sumos, because I've seen some really heavy sumos, but with that weight, they are incredibly flexible. The one earlier was doing the box splits. I mean, there he is, look at that. That is not an easy... I'm training to do the box splits, and I can't do that. And look at him, he's going to roll all the way through as well. Rob, they're very fit, aren't they? But these ones look lighter.
So they are incredibly fit athletes, and I think one of the things people forget when they look at sumo or they look at rikishi is that they are athletes, you know, and to a degree we're looking at two sumo wrestlers standing next to each other, and so they look normal size in comparison to each other. In terms of their body fat percentage, is actually very, very low.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK with the UK's #1 news channel for the 4th consecutive month. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming on today's action-packed show. With tax rises now seemingly inevitable, today Rachel Reeves blamed the Tories. She blamed austerity. She blamed Brexit. She blamed the pandemic. In fact, anybody and anything other than herself or Sir Keir Starmer's government. Is the Labour Party running out of excuses? And the British public running out of patience? Yesterday it emerged that the BBC had doctored footage of Donald Trump, which saw the Beeb blasted as fake news. Well, today it gets worse, because a whistleblower has claimed that the BBC's bias pushed Hamas lies around the world. Can the battered BBC ever recover from this latest scandal? And Dick Cheney, America's most powerful modern vice president and chief architect of the war on terror, has died at the age of 84. We'll be discussing his legacy throughout today's show. And a Lib Dem council is under fire after they charged poppy sellers to park for the first time in 30 years. Well, skinflints. Well, I'll be joined by a Tory MP who's blasted this as shameful and deeply unpatriotic. You can say that again, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Sure. Ways, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. And we're going to start today's show. There's only one place to start, of course, is that extraordinary speech this morning, which many people think was pointless. Just a complete nothing burger of a speech, because this morning the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in her words, set the context for widely anticipated tax rises in the budget by listing the challenges facing the UK economy. And I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. You were there this morning. For that, you have my condolences. I have to say, I watched it in its entirety. I thought it was a masterclass in dodging any acceptance of blame, any acceptance of responsibility. A rolling buffet of excuses was the phrase I wrote down, blaming the Tories, Brexit, the pandemic, austerity. Even had a pop at the Reform Party, a side order of word salads, and finishing with a nothing burger on tax. We didn't learn anything new. What was the point of it today?
Well, the point was to prepare the ground for almost certainly tax increases when the budget happens on November the 26th. That's what it is about. It's a preparation. In a sense, She gave the first one-third of her speech on Budget Day today. So she set out the history, that, as they would see it, the COVID pandemic response, the slow growth, the inability to look at control inflation as they wanted to. They laid it all out there, and yes, nothing to see here, not my problem. It wasn't really Labour's fault. And then she said, well, we had to go last year. And then they want to go towards, here's the choices we're facing now. They are saying to us, with a very tight fiscal position, they could try and cut capital spending, they could ease on the planning reforms, or not go after regulation. They won't do that. Instead, they're going to go and try and tackle the cost of living crisis, NHS waiting lists and national debt by making what they call difficult choices. This is the key quote from what she said this morning, and it's a long speech, and I'm sorry you thought it was a word salad, Martin. I was in the front row, not being called for a question, but I made some notes. Yes. If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. That means that is language shifting. That means they're not ruling out increasing one of those three things: VAT, national insurance, or income tax. Of those three, VAT looks safe because you talked about food and energy prices going up. National insurance, last year she did that, adding the cost of NICs to employers. So really we're looking at income tax, maybe 1 or 2p. 2p is worth £6 billion a year, and that could go some way towards restoring the finances.
That will be a huge, many might say, betrayal of repeated pledges not to raise those three.
It would be a betrayal.
It would be a total betrayal, because repeatedly we will not. This will be a once in a Parliament budget. We will not raise taxes on working people. Those key taxes, Chris Hope: national insurance, income tax, VAT. Already, you can hear the furious sound of U-turns coming from Number 11, and people aren't going to swallow this. It's like, how long can you keep blaming the previous regime? How long can you keep blaming external forces? And people are very mindful of the fact, Chris Hope, there's been a huge spending splurge by this Labour government. 30 billion plus on the Chagos Islands, 9 or 10 billion on public sector pay rises, carbon capture overseas, giveaways, endless giveaways to Ukraine. A lot of people say charity begins at home. It certainly does if you're a train driver or a junior doctor or a public sector worker. But for those people getting up in the morning, going out and making Britain work, getting into their white vans, driving to work, they're going to feel hard done by if there is a tax rise. They really are.
Yes, they will do. And that language last year from Rachel Reeves at the CBI conference, I'm really clear, she said, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or taxes. So the question really is, how can voters trust you? As I said, she wouldn't take the question from GBNews today, but she did try and answer it, or versions of that, to other journalists, it seems. And she's committed to delivering 1.5 million new homes during this Parliament. She's desperate to bring debt down. One of the big themes there was the cost of borrowing. It means that we are just eating into public finances, and that's got to end. But it was in a sense, for me, it was like going to the dentist. You go through all the heart, you get the gas, the air, you get knocked out, but you're not going to have the procedure for 3 weeks. And we were really waiting for the difficult dentistry for 3 weeks. And between now and November 26th, there'll be a lot of speculation about which taxes will go up. But there was no real talk beyond what we had in the summer of any further spending cuts, and we heard nothing or very little on welfare cuts. They will reform welfare, but not to say how much. And just finally, twice I counted mention of tax cuts. We're a long way from that happening.
Well, the market reacted with a wobble in a way that I think many taxpayers will have echoed. The pound plummeted to a 7-month low, at 0.4% against the dollar, the lowest since April 2025. Confidence is low, enthusiasm is low, and the excuses are very, very high. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by the former Home Secretary, and that is Suella Braverman, MP. Suella Braverman, a pleasure to have your company here in Westminster. How long can Rachel Reeves get away with blaming the Conservatives, blaming Brexit, blaming anything but themselves?
Well, I think the British people, and in particular GBNews viewers, will see through this attempt to deflect blame. A lot of the consequences that we have seen in the last 18 months on the economy, falling productivity, falling investment, sluggish growth, falling growth, rising unemployment, are all really effects of Labour decisions. There was nothing that's been unforeseeable that's happened since Labour came to government, like COVID or a war in Europe. So, you know, Rachel Reeves has made a lot of decisions, big spending decisions, big tax rises, and she's seeing the effects of those today.
Kemi Badenoch was on form today. She called this one long waffle bomb, a new word there, almost straight out of the copybook of Boris Johnson, a laundry list of excuses. And that's really what it felt like to anybody listening in, a failure to accept any responsibility. And the markets don't like that kind of, blaming anybody but yourself. All it left was the residue, the fear that now tax rises are just inevitable.
Well, it's the great betrayal, isn't it, really? The Labour team expressly promised not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance at the general election. They were adamant about it. There were no ifs and no buts about it. What does Rachel Reeves do? First thing she does is she raises employers' national insurance. We saw that last year. We're seeing that have a crushing effect on employers and particularly small and medium-sized businesses around the country. Now, the very strong speculation is that she's going to have to raise income tax, a massive breach of her promise. And I just don't see how she'll be able to recover from that, because all trust, the very little trust that remains in this government, will be squandered. And as we've seen in the past, governments don't recover when they make a massive breach of trust like this.
Nigel Farage has accused the Chancellor of spending like a drunken sailor. And it certainly is a feeling that if you're on the dole, or if you're a public sector worker, or if you're a recipient of a public sector pension, or you're a train driver, or you're in the Ukraine or foreign aid, you're sitting pretty. Endless giveaways paid for by the taxpayer, no control on our borders, a huge, huge bill, and yet every time they try and make cutbacks, particularly on benefits, there's a backbench rebellion. This government can't control its spending.
Absolutely, it cannot. Its spending is out of control. We saw massive pay rises driven by militant unions who are effectively running government policy at the moment, but massive pay rises to public sector workers driven by militant unions. We've seen huge expenditure on welfare, absolutely no real attempt to reform or reduce welfare spending. We could be saving billions of pounds by scrapping foreign aid, which we're sending to overseas countries. We could be saving billions by reducing our carbon capture scheme, which is a nonsensical net zero fad. There are many ways in which we could reduce public spending, but this government just won't do it.
It's fair to point out that the Labour government, astonishingly, did cut foreign aid more than Conservatives. But I want to move on to, you mentioned that word betrayal. Let's talk about the BBC. An astonishing story broke in the show yesterday afternoon. An independent external advisor, Michael Prescott, blew the whistle on editorial bias. Clear, provable, blatant, unavoidable bias from the BBC, doctoring a Donald Trump documentary, Panorama, splicing together footage to create an entirely false picture of what actually happened. And now it gets worse. Today we found out the BBC, the quotes, pushed Hamas lies around the world by taking Hamas data, statistics and fake news as fact, constantly painting Israel as the aggressor and minimising any Israeli suffering. It's been a dark, dark time for the BBC, and you've been very outspoken on this, Suella Braverman.
Well, I think the case is now compelling that we need to scrap the licence fee. Those of us have been, many of us, including many of us here on GB News, have been advocating for that for years. But I just think this is indefensible now. Actively doctoring and manipulating the truth is the antithesis of what the state broadcaster should be standing for, and at odds with whatever, everything that respectable journalism represents in this country. How can we have any confidence or faith in what the BBC puts out after this episode? It's a shameful day for the BBC. I think Tim Davie really needs to consider his position, but the licence fee and the whole structure of the BBC is not fit for purpose. And it's the latest in a long litany of failures. They refused to describe Hamas as terrorists. They collaborated with agents or those linked to Hamas to produce a documentary. They've minimised some of the suffering in Israel, and they've amplified and distorted some of the issues relating to Gaza. They've been partisan, misleading And today, I'm thinking, I believe really is a day of shame for the BBC.
So 2 things. Are you saying that Ofcom should investigate? And should Tim Davie go?
Tim Davie needs to go. I just don't see how he can stay in post after not just this misrepresentation, but also the other scandals relating to the BBC, whether it's Hugh Edwards or other very highly paid people at the BBC who have been really shown to have fallen short of BBC's standards of propriety. And I think there needs to be a full-blown investigation into anti-Semitism and also whether the BBC's been adhering to editorial guidelines.
Do you think the Labour Party has got the stomach for that kind of fight? They seem to steam into GB News at the drop of a hat. Cat seems to have got the tongue on this matter.
Exactly. I mean, I thought it was telling this morning, Chris, that Rachel Reeves refused to take a question from the People's Channel. Says it all. Really, they're scared.
Well, it's extraordinary. We are bigger than the rival news channels the past 4 months, but they don't seem to want to take the question, which is, a straightforward question about what our viewers care about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really sticking 2 fingers up to the British people. People are voting with their feet. They're watching GB News in very, very high and unprecedented numbers. That's a vote of confidence in you. The government should take note of that and pay due deference to that, really.
Suella Bradman, thank you for joining us in the studio in Westminster. Thank you for your company. Always a pleasure. Let's get to my next guest now. Speak with the founder of Turn Left Media, Curtis Daly. Curtis, always a pleasure to have your esteemed company too, my old son. Did you manage to stay awake through Rachel Reeves' speech this morning? I found it difficult. And if so, what leapt out at you?
Not much, actually. I think you described it as a nothing burger. You're probably right about that. The things that weren't in there, agree or disagree, the things I wanted to see were a wealth tax, because it's backed by 80% of the people. Even something like having capital gains tax at the same rate as income tax. The problem with Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party is not necessarily the policies, it's the political side. Because at the last general election, they said they weren't going to raise income tax, VAT and national insurance. Now, of course, they went into that election saying, we're not going to have tax rises, we're going to stick to our fiscal rules. So basically, they paint themselves into a corner, and it's entirely their fault, by the way. And now they've got the media asking them, well, are you going to raise taxes or not? So the idea that this is anyone else's fault is ridiculous. Now, had the Labour Party said, look, we're going to raise taxes on the richest, or we're going to do a wealth tax, they would have won, partly because the Conservatives are toast, but also, again, like I said, at least 80% of people support a wealth tax. Then you could at least say to the people, this is our manifesto, this is our political project, you voted for us, we're going to do it. But they said they're not going to do that, and now they've got these public services that they need to restore, and they've got no way of paying for it. I mean, they could pay for it by ditching the ridiculous fiscal rules. The one thing I do kind of agree with Rachel Reeves on, and it really irks me to say that, is I do hate it when governments blame past governments. So, the Conservatives did that about the Labour Party for years and about the financial crisis, which was a global financial crisis. But Rachel Reeves blaming austerity, that is a good point, because we've had 14 years of cuts and you can't fix that overnight. But what I don't like is when they say, and when Rachel Reeves says, is, well, we're blaming the Conservatives for the finances. You can literally fix that. You can invest in our public services. You can do it without even increasing taxes, by the way. These are political decisions. And this must be, sorry, I hate to go on, but when I think of David Cameron, I disagree with so much of his government and his policies, but he was an effective communicator, I think. Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, these people in the Labour Party, politically, are the worst I've ever seen.
Well, a lot of people might agree with that, but I want to pick you up on a point you made a minute ago, Curtis Daly. Beloved of the socialist left, wealth taxes, they don't work. They've never worked. They don't work anywhere on the planet. They've failed in France. They've failed in Spain. They've failed anywhere they've been brought in because it chases the wealthiest away, and there's multiple abundant proof that actually there's less return to the exchequer if you bring in socialist-style wealth taxes.
I'd hate to disagree with you, but you're actually wrong about that. First of all, the point of a wealth tax is to reduce inequality. A lot of politicians and the media...
But the wealthy just clear off.
Hold on. So the media pushes this idea that the economy is like a household budget, that we have finite amount of money and basically you have to spend it there and spend it here and cut back there. That's not how it works. It's not how the modern banking system works. So we can borrow, or we can use targeted quantitative easing to spend on public services. Then you tax it back afterwards. So first of all, it's not about bringing in revenue, it's about reducing inequality. Second of all, when it comes to the wealthy leaving, that doesn't happen because this isn't about income taxes. It's about taxes on assets, and assets you cannot take with you. You can't take housing with you. You can't take land with you. These things are immovable taxable assets. Now, when it came to income taxes, again, the left are far more concerned about wealth than income, because I think you should be taxing unearned wealth and passive income rather than hard work. But even if you were to raise income tax on the rich, the report where apparently all these millionaires left showed that 0.3% left. So the reason why people don't bring in a wealth tax isn't because it doesn't work. As I said on your show the other day, there's no political will for it because most political parties are funded by the extreme wealthy, and they're not going to support you by implementing a wealth tax, which hurts your donors.
OK, we shall have to agree to disagree, but it's always a pleasure to have your perspective.
Always a pleasure. Thank
as the
you,
founder
Martin.
of Turn Left Media. Curtis Daly, thank you very, very much for joining us. Thank you once again to Suella Bradman and to Chris Oak. Great starts to the show. Thanks to you both. Now, still to come, yesterday, as we said earlier, it emerged that the BBC shamefully doctored footage of Donald Trump. We saw the BBC blasted as fake news. Well, today, it got worse because a whistleblower has claimed that the BBC's bias pushed Hamas lies around the world. Can the battered Beeb ever recover from this latest scandal? That's next with me, Martin Daubney on GB News. 4 months on the trot, Britain's #1 news channel. Yeah.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:22. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, breaking news from this past hour. And a leaked dossier has accused the BBC's Arabic service of minimising Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The memo says allegations made against Israel were raced to air without adequate checks due to a, quote, desire to always believe the worst about Israel. Now, this, of course, comes as a report also revealed yesterday that the broadcaster doctored a Donald Trump speech by making the US president appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riots, when, of course, he did nothing of the sort. Well, let's now speak with Hadar Seller, who's the co-editor of Camera UK. Hadar, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. It was bad enough yesterday. It sincerely was. And a lot of us just watching the BBC's output have suspected for some time that they have a blatant bias in favour of Palestine against Israel. We saw that with Hamas, How to Survive a War Zone, the documentary backed by Gary Lineker and a load of other lovers. We saw that with the furore over Bob Villan, the coverage at Glastonbury, and the seeming lack of any accountability after that. But this is seemingly worse. By deliberately minimising Israeli suffering and amplifying anything that paints Israel as the aggressor, is this an unforgivable new low?
New, I don't think so. I've been monitoring the BBC content since 2012, and it has become significantly worse since the 7th of October 2023, but we can't say that there weren't any problems before that either. No.
So you're saying this is a continuum. And, you know, I spoke with Danny Kelly, a previous BBC employee of many years, and he said something which really stuck in my head. And he said, this isn't about an individual, this isn't about a chain of command, it's actually about a mindset, it's about a culture. Do you believe there is a culture embedded into the DNA of the BBC that are anti-Israel?
I don't know about the word culture, but I think there's definitely an organisational culture which prevents people from doing their job, basically, from doing proper journalism. And we've seen, since the beginning of the war, we've seen multiple examples of the BBC, for example, joining, conscripting to various campaigns, for example, on the topic of genocide, on the topic of famine, the whole campaign that was run against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation supply of humanitarian aid. I think we've seen it time and time again. My colleagues at Camera Arabic have, since the beginning of the war, been exposing some really, really scandalous social media output from BBC Arabic employees, and very little, if anything, has been done about that. So I think there's sort of an organisational culture that as I say, prevents people from doing their actual job.
Now, of course, the BBC, and I'm trying to have some semblance of balance here, the BBC have continually complained, as have a lot of other critics of Israel, that the reason they're having to rely on Hamas data, Hamas information, is because journalists aren't allowed in to the area, into the Gaza Strip, into Gaza City. But there's a good reason for that. They might get massacred or kidnapped.
Well, yes, you know, I mean, as an Israeli, I'm not really sure I want my sons in the Gaza Strip to have to look after BBC reporters in addition to the rest of their work. But, you know, as you say, they've been pushing this since the beginning of the war. And if you look at the BBC's record, then that just doesn't stand up to scrutiny because, you know, in 2012, we had the BBC claiming that Israel had killed the son of one of their Gaza employees, Jihad Mashrawi. It turned out to be a shortfall Hamas missile. In 2014, we had Ola Gur in the Gaza Strip saying that she found no evidence whatsoever of Hamas's use of human shields. We all know that's not the case. In 2021, I think it was, we had Jeremy Bowen visiting the north of the Gaza Strip, again with a heart-rending filmed report about some children who'd been killed. which again, actually by the time he was there, it was already known that that was a short-fall missile. So this excuse doesn't really stand up to scrutiny.
Let's cut to the chase. Danny Cohen, he's the former director of BBC Television. He said earlier on today in The Telegraph, in response to their excellent exclusive by Gordon Rayner, he said it was now clear that the BBC was not safe in the hands of its senior managers and that they should hang their heads in shame and resign. Do you concur?
I don't know about the resign. That's not for me to decide. But what I do think is that the BBC is not supplying the service that it should be supplying, that it's supposed to be supplying to the British public, and the British public pay for this service. It's not a favour that anybody's doing them, and the BBC's funding public are entitled to get what they're paying for.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. That's Hadar Salah, that's the co-editor of Camera UK. Thank you for your time. Chris Hope, let's get some reaction from you on the politics of this. We heard Suella Braverman there saying the licence fee should be scrapped. Boris Johnson has called this a total disgrace. There's been relative silence yet from the Labour Party. A lot of people think is that because Labour Party basically take a similar political position to the BBC on these matters?
No, that's not the case. I mean, it's not really a Labour Party issue to talk to, but it is a government issue because of the fact that we all pay our licence fee, and if you don't, you can be prosecuted. So the government has a duty of care over the BBC, despite it being independent. Ofcom look after it. They regulate GBNews, of course, as well. Now, Number 10 say this, that the senior figures in the Department of Culture, Media and Sport have now received the dossier, and they've been assured the BBC is investigating it. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, she's also got a copy of this dossier. She's being updated on developments, and the Number 10 spokesman, the PM's official spokesman, told us this earlier today, that the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, expects the corporation to report the news accurately and impartially. She expects them to look into questions of editorial standards thoroughly, because that is obviously important for the public's trust. They recognise there's a trust issue here. What isn't known yet is whether, for example, the Culture Committee might investigate. What will Ofcom do? But this one is just gradually, I think, slowly building ahead of steam. If people watch what the Telegraph is saying has been changed here, look at those videos of Donald Trump yesterday, it is shocking, and the BBC need to explain that.
Donald Trump Jr. called this fake news. He said the reporters in the UK are just as dishonest and full of, you can guess the rest, as the ones here in America. And Nigel Farage is saying it's no wonder that fewer people are now paying the BBC licence fee every single year. But on that point of Ofcom regulation, there's a huge problem with that. And you know as well as I do that the BBC complaints process tries to bury an Ofcom complaint because they're allowed to go through their own complaint system internally first. That isn't fair. That's not democratic. If you or I made an allegation like this, we'd be hung out to dry by Ofcom. Why is the BBC seemingly enjoying two-tiered monitoring?
Well, that's the structure that they have done. I mean, I think
it needs to change.
Maybe it needs to change. We'll wait and see. Let's see how this one plays out, certainly. But Ofcom have a role there. But of course, it's the BBC to investigate first. But it is clear that Lisa Nandy is across this and wants to see action, because it is really worrying. And this is an internal document drawn up by Michael Prescott, who used to work with this Standards Board advisory team to the BBC. You know, it needs to be taken seriously, and I think it should be.
And just a final shout-out to your former colleague, Gordon Rayner, who came with this scoop. More revelations, we believe, are due out tomorrow, this time on BBC Bias, around the trans issue and how any criticism of the trans ideology is routinely buried or attacked by the BBC. Day by day, this is getting worse at the BBC, a culture of editorial bias, a culture of editorial fixing, and simply now the cat's out of the bag, Chris Hope. This will not go back in the box. Thank you very, very much for joining us and give us your reaction. Now, a BBC spokesperson told GB News this: while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Michael Prescott is a former advisor to a board committee where differing views and opinions of our coverage are routinely discussed and debated. Now, it's worth pointing out that's the same comment the BBC gave over 24 hours ago. A lot more still to come to now at 4 o'clock, including we'll be finding out about a notorious grooming gang offender who's now fled Britain and has been blocked from returning. And that's with our man Charlie Peters. You with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Once again, Britain's #1 news channel.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's fairly grim out there in places with some heavy rain coming down for the rest of the day. Blustery and cloudy for many, as well as being very mild for the time of year. We've got low pressure sitting to the southwest, drawing up this brisk but mild southwesterly airflow, and within that airflow we've got a lot of rainfall, especially initially for the southwest into Wales, and then that rain moves through the Midlands into northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, all accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 miles an hour near southwestern coast. But it's not raining everywhere overnight. We will see some drier and clearer weather towards the southeast, where it is mild, but also to the north of Scotland, where it is fairly chilly first thing Wednesday. That's where the best of the sunshine will be, in fact, northern Scotland, but we'll also see some breaks in the cloud through East Anglia and the southeast, 15 Celsius from the word go. Drizzly and damp for the southwest into Wales, but not quite as soggy as Tuesday. The heavier rain by this stage pushing into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, southern Scotland. It's also increasingly cloudy and damp through central Scotland. But like I say, Shetland, Orkney, the far north of the mainland of Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, faring well through Wednesday morning for sunny skies. We will see the skies brighten, though, further south across the Midlands into the south and southeast of England. And as that happens, although it stays breezy, it will feel pleasant with temperatures up to 17 Celsius. Wales and the southwest, though, see a return to some showery rain later, whilst it stays damp for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of northern England. And that's how it looks for bonfire night, a real mixed bag across the UK. The wettest weather likely for much of Scotland, departing Northern Ireland later in the evening, but remaining across northwest England. Drier elsewhere and very mild if you are outdoors looking at bonfire displays.
Thank you, Britain, for making us the fastest growing news website in the nation, because the truth matters, and so do you.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A7 is closed between Langholm and Howick due to a road traffic incident, causing delays for those travelling in the area. Travellers are advised to seek alternative routes where possible. On the M4, disruptions affect journeys between Junction 30 Cardiff Gate and Junction 49 Pont Abraham. Road users should plan their journeys carefully and stay informed about potential diversions. And on the trains, there is major disruption affecting Avanti West Coast and Transpennine Express services between Carlisle and Preston, leading to delays and cancellations. Passengers should check service updates before travelling. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 3:35. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a Rochdale grooming gang ringleader has been permanently barred from Britain. 55-year-old Adil Khan, who raped and impregnated a 13-year-old when he fled the country in secret last month. The Home Office has now issued a deportation order blocking his return, despite claims that being sent abroad would breach his human rights as a role model to his son. As we await Charlie Peters to join us, Chris Hope, let's speak to you about this story. This story, the case of Adil Khan, in many ways exemplifies everything that's wrong with our broken deportation system and our broken justice system. He was a Pakistani national. He was a dual national who then decided he didn't want to be a Pakistani national because he could get deported to Pakistan. He might not like it there. He said his human rights would be violated. He couldn't be a father to his son. I would argue he's already been a terrible role model by being a rapist and paedophile. He then decides that the British government and the Pakistani government slowly, they lumber towards some kind of agreement where he could be deported to Pakistan at last, which should have happened, by the way, immediately in the eyes of many people watching this channel. And then when he got whiff of that, he simply vanished. So he can't come back to Britain, but he's at large and he's completely evading justice.
It's outrageous. And of course, the victims here are dying to see some form of justice, some form of lessons learned. How is this justice for the victim of the 13-year-old young girl who was impregnated by Adil Khan? The Manchester police went to his property for normal post-prison release checks. He wasn't there. A spokesman says that was on October 21st. He wasn't there. Inquiries have established he has now left the country. We're working alongside the Home Office to locate him. This man cannot be allowed to return here, but where has he gone now? What has happened to him? It's a disaster. It shows why there needs to be some grip on this whole crisis from the government.
OK, let's bring in our man now. It's GB News' national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you for joining us. I was just saying to Chris Hope that here, that this case sums up everything that's wrong with our broken deportation system. We now have a paedophile on the run.
And his co-abuser, Kari Ralph, rescinded their Pakistani nationality after Theresa May removed their British citizenship. And that allowed them, essentially, to resist deportation for so long. Both men racking up legal aid bills paid for by the taxpayer of well over £550,000. And as you've just heard, Greater Manchester Police checked in on Adil Khan, as they regularly do, as part of their policy last month, and found that he just wasn't home. He's understood now to be somewhere in Europe because, of course, due to that nationality issue, he's not returned back to Pakistan. But his co-abuser, Kari Ralph, it was revealed earlier this year that while he's resisting deportation to Pakistan, he's built a home there, costing £285,000, potentially, Martin, preempting some further agreement between the governments in London and Islamabad. Because we know, as we reported on it earlier this year, there has been some high-level diplomacy between the British and Pakistani governments on these two men and other grooming gang offenders who the Labour government are desperate to deport but have been struggling in diplomacy with their opposite numbers in Islamabad. For example, Martin, we were able to reveal earlier this year that one of the offers put forward from the Pakistani Interior Ministry was that they might accept these two offenders back to the country if and only if their flag carrier airline, Pakistan International Airlines, was permitted to return to Britain after a 5-year pause due to safety concerns. This, of course, having a major impact on their revenue, and that would impact, obviously, Pakistan's standing in the world and their own budgets, as this being a flag carrier for the country. Now, PIA, that airline, has started to return to Britain. Flights were going to Manchester last week. But this man on your screen right now, the 55-year-old Adil Khan, he has left the country, but not because of a deportation, because he's left of his own volition after that extensive legal deportation battle with the government. And Martin, I'd just like to add as well on this issue that the Pakistani side, as we reported earlier this year, they are worried that it could set a precedent if these two men are removed. If Kari Ralph and Adil Khan and the third abuser in that Rochdale ring, Abdulaziz, is also deported, they fear that if these men go, others will need to follow, and they don't want them back in the country. Now, there's also criticism here, as you'd imagine, for the Conservative government, who also failed to deport these men during their time in power. In particular, after they brought in legislation that would allow them to apply visa penalties and also limits on foreign aid to countries that refuse to accept deportation under the Nationalities and Borders Act of 2023. These powers were never used. A safeguarding minister told us 2 years ago, Laura Farris, that they were interesting and that they were a possibility, but those powers are never deployed. Shabana Mahmood, Martin, the Home Secretary, she's been talking up those powers. But again, there's a lot of talk, and for families of grooming gang victims, they say actually a bit of action is needed now.
Charlie Peters, this is an example of toothless Britain. The Pakistani authorities get what they want. The airline is rocking into our country. That's all sorted out. We can't even deport the worst Pakistanis that have violated our children. And they're concerned it might set a precedent It should set a precedent. Every single one of them should be kicked out of the country. And if the Pakistanis don't like it, stop visas, stop anybody coming in, stop foreign aid, stop trade, grow a pair, do something about it.
But Martin, all of these powers exist, and this is the frustration that we hear from grooming gang victims and their families and campaigners often, and also, of course, their lawyers who represent them, who are putting forward their claims, their concerns, but coming up against what some critics have, of course, described as a brick wall in terms of action, because those powers are available to the state, but they say are all too often not used. I mean, the number of visas offered to Pakistani nationals is in the tens of thousands, and yet the state there still resists these deportation efforts. And in the meanwhile, when people are leaving prison after these offences, and Adil Khan, that 55-year-old, he was released after 4 years of an 8-year sentence when he was imprisoned in 2012. There's a lot of criticism for that length of sentence as well. When they are released, Martin, they return to the communities where those crimes took place. For example, Kari Ralph, one of the ringleaders of that Rochdale ring, one of the first to be prosecuted, he's now working as a takeaway delivery driver in Rochdale. One of his victims reacted with horror in 2020 when she saw him at a supermarket. And this is an experience that many victims and survivors have had across the country, even with foreign offenders who should be deported even if they have just a 12-month sentence. But of course, in many cases, they have significantly longer sentences than that, being released back into the community, being welcomed back into the community in some shocking cases, and then bumping into them on the street, in the supermarket, at work, years after that horrifying abuse. It's one thing to hope that they might be deported, but it's just another to think that they might avoid those local communities altogether.
And that, of course, re-violates and re-traumatises these poor survivors every single time. You can't imagine the horror of coming face to face with somebody who's violated you, impregnated you as a 13-year-old girl, Charlie Peters. The betrayal of Britain continues. Thank you for shining a light on it, as ever, my friend, GBNews national reporter Charlie Peters. Thank you. Now, coming up, we're in Inverness, where another former army camp is due to receive hundreds of asylum seekers. We'll find out how the locals are feeling.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Back at home, Buckingham Palace is in talks to find a new home for Sarah Ferguson as discussions continue over Prince Andrew's future.
Well, the pair still share the 30-room Windsor residence alongside the late Queen's corgis. But according to the Sun newspaper this morning, Prince Andrew gave the King an ultimatum, demanding that he should be given Frogmore Cottage for himself and Adelaide Cottage for Sarah Ferguson.
Well, this comes as the King was heckled by his brother's links to Jeffrey Epstein during a visit to Lichfield Cathedral in Staffordshire yesterday. Here's what happened.
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew's Charles? What do you think? Should the MPs be allowed to debate the royals in the House of Commons?
Oh, shut up.
Well, the crowd turned on that protester.
They did. You can see it there. You can see it there.
Yeah.
You can see there's a time and a place for everything. But that's not about the King, or it's not about the scandal. That's about him. That's about Big Mouth in the crowd there, just wanting attention for himself. Jack Stokes, let's get the opinions now of royal commentator Jack. Jack, what did you think about that heckling that went on yesterday?
Hi, Yeoman. Yeah, no, well, we've seen this time and time again, haven't we? I think we saw it, the last time we saw it was at the late Queen's funeral. There was a heckler at that, and they got shut down quite quickly as well. It's unfortunate, and, you know, the King's not done anything wrong. He's actually trying to go about his day-to-day work. He's still sort of struggling on as he always has. You know, he's a real hard worker, and he doesn't need to hear that kind of situation when he's trying to deal with it probably behind closed doors.
GB News, the People's Channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
3:47, you're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, I've got some political reaction to that huge breaking news story. Donald Trump, the BBC documentary was doctored. Today it got worse. The BBC backing Hamas lies is the phrase used by this independent inquiry. Chris, we've got some political reaction.
That's right, pressure's mounting already on the BBC. Caroline Darnage, who is the Tory chairwoman of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Select Committee, she says they are meeting tomorrow. This committee will meet tomorrow and discuss the implications of these allegations. She says they are extremely worrying and come at a critical time for the BBC, at a time when trust in politics and mainstream media is so low. Our state broadcaster has an additional responsibility to ensure that it reports contentious and politically inflammatory issues with a straight bat. And also Nigel Huddleston, who is the shadow culture secretary, he says that the latest claims about the BBC's Arabic service is irresponsible and strays far away from the BBC's charter duty to be impartial.
Conservatives getting on the front foot here. Kemi Badenoch earlier on today said this is fake news. Heads must roll. Suella Braverman in the studio earlier in this hour said it's time to scrap the BBC licence fee. Boris Johnson saying this is a total disgrace. And from Nigel Farage, it's no wonder that fewer people are paying the BBC licence fee every single year. And there's more due out tomorrow. We've got the trans cover up tomorrow. Excellent scoop, of course, from Gordon Rayner on The Telegraph. Thank you very much for that update there, Chris Hope. Now, a week in, and the government's asylum housing plan is already running into huge trouble. Cameron Barracks in Inverness, which was meant to hold 300 people, has now been deemed unsafe, with asbestos now being removed from the site. Well, let's now speak with GB News' Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who is there in Inverness. Tony, isn't it incredible how these barracks were once safe for British soldiers, but now they're deemed not safe for asylum seekers? OK, we're struggling to get an audio connection there with Tony Maguire. Perhaps when we get that, Tony can come back. Keep talking away, Captain, and we'll come back to you if we get you before the end of the hour. Chris, let's talk about the situation. Military barracks was, to be fair, proposed by the previous government at RAF, Wethersfield at RAF, Scampton at Linton on Ouse. None of them ever worked because the locals don't want them. They're not consulted. They have no say. And more to the point, it's simply a case of hundreds of young men, because let's face it, they're young men on a barracks, simply wandering around a town, wandering around a village, overloading public facilities and with nothing to do. And the Labour government now have decided this bright idea might be worth a revisit.
Well, frankly, what else could they do? The other options were putting them in what the government has now said is luxurious accommodation, or worse to that effect. That means hotels. When many people can't afford to go to a hotel, they wonder why on earth asylum seekers are being put up in a hotel at our expense. When we've had a speech today, of course, from the Chancellor saying that taxes must rise to pay for the spending we can't afford. It looks ridiculous. The other option is a house of multiple occupation. That means that they're in the actual community, moving in next door to families who may be concerned about the background of mainly young men next door. Is that right? So probably the least best option is simply this: put them into army camps. We've been here before. before they were the Tory government, they moved them out into hotels because there were concerns about them there. So, and they're already, I'm looking online here, that already there are concerns in Scotland around the Cameron barracks. We'll hear from Tony Maguire shortly. People will be protesting. Why should they have it happen to them? Part of the problem with the Home Office, I think, which they're not doing now, is the secrecy. They would simply take over and book out a hotel without telling anybody, and suddenly you couldn't go and stay there because our asylum seekers are moving in. That appears to be end. They appear to be telegraphing where they're going to, but that, of course, allows a head of steam to build up in opposition, and that could be the next problem.
Chris, you call this the best option. It's not the best option. The best option is to close borders.
The best they've got.
The best option is not... look, this is simply treating the symptom. It's not going to the root of the cause. You can shove these people into a barracks, you can shove them into a hotel, you can shove them into an HMO, you can build 1.5 million new houses and fill them full of asylum seekers. That probably will happen. Fact of the matter is, it won't stop the pull factor so long as people know if they turn up to Hotel Britannia, where the food is hot and the meals are free, that's the problem. We've got a huge issue with the pull factor. This doesn't address that.
Well, the government recognises that. They want to try and end the reliance on these hotels. They want to shut them down, move them apparently into camps. They want to do that, but they're trying to buy time for this so-called one-in, one-out programme to work. They want to try and get people and clear this backlog, and that's what they're doing next.
Tony Maguire, I think now we have the technology. Tony, over to you.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear now. I am up in Inverness, where we've been all day, and indeed I'm just in the area behind me. You see a mix of military and civic houses, and this, would you believe, if you follow me around here, these homes are actually literally sharing a border with the Cameron barracks. This is really the core of some of the safety concerns around the choosing of this barracks. The Home Office chose it because it was on the outskirts of Inverness, but as you can see, it is surrounded by residential zones. In fact, on 3 sides, 2 of them including a school. Now, if I go a little bit further over here, I'm joined by former Councillor Alan Duffy. Alan, thank you for joining us. Now, you were with the Highland Council and a former military man. So what do you make of this news with the 300 asylum seekers being moved into the barracks?
My first initial reaction was I was a bit shocked because there was no consultation done with the residents of Inverness, and let alone with the actual councillors themselves.
And obviously, from a council point of view, you know, the people of Inverness that we spoke to today, they were, you know, not happy, I think, is playing it down. You know, do they have any recourse here? We know now that it's going to be delayed until at least into next year. You know, what should they be doing with their time now?
Well, I think for the councillors, they should be looking at planning issues for this looks more like a change of use of the buildings behind me, and it's taken it away from being military use for more of a civilian use.
And sorry, just as a councillor, I guess, you know, you've worked shoulder to shoulder with people in Inverness for years now. You know, as we're hearing, obviously, that they're, you know, enraged really at the lack of kind of being told that this coming upon them. You know, are you hearing that as well from, you know, old army buddies that you're speaking to and people in the town?
It's been a mix between people living in town, for mostly, I would say, for people that weren't overly happy with what's been said, has been announced, should I say, and that is mixed between the military personnel that I know myself, as well as the civilian population around the area.
Well, of course, this is Britain's most northerly city, a population of about 48,000 in the city centre, and 10,000 people have gone and signed a petition to ask the Home Office to stop this. Now, you know, I think from what we've seen today, it's quite clear to see that the people of Inverness, I think, deserve something of an answer, both from the Scottish Government and the Home Office.
Thank you very much for that report there from Inverness. Tony Maguire, thanks for your patience. It was well worth getting to you. This is the point about all of these things. The locals got no vote, no voice, no veto, no power. Simply bypassed. This is shoved upon them by the Home Office into their area. Often the MPs don't know. Often the councils don't know. The first that the locals know is when they read about it in the press. It's completely and utterly unacceptable to people around Britain just to be landed with this on their doorsteps. Exactly the same position in Linton on Ouse, a site I visited. It's literally at the end of people's back gardens. 300 asylum seekers simply wandering around willy-nilly. There's no wonder people in Inverness are completely had enough of this. Still to come, yesterday it emerged the BBC doctored footage of Donald Trump, which saw the bee blasted as fake news. Today, it's Hamas. That's next.
Thank you, Britain, for our more than 2 million YouTube subscribers and more than 2 billion views. That is Britain watching, sharing and making its voice heard louder than ever before.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A7 is currently closed in both directions between Langholm and Howick due to an unfortunate road traffic incident. In Surrey, there is a broken down vehicle on the M23 northbound between Junction 9 and Junction 8, leading to one-lane closure. Hertfordshire's M25 sees issues with 2 lanes closed in the anti-clockwise direction between Junction 25 and Junction 24 due to another vehicle breakdown. And on the trains, both Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express are experiencing major disruptions between Carlisle and Preston. Please stay up to date at gbnews.com for more travel news.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. There's £30,000 in tax-free cash to make 2026 the best year yet. A further £10,000 cash to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £1,000 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. And we'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's action-packed show. With tax rises now seemingly inevitable, today Rachel Reeves blamed the Tories. She blamed austerity, blamed Brexit. She blamed the pandemic. In fact, anybody and anything other than herself or Sir Keir Starmer's Labour government. Is Labour running out of excuses? And are the British public running out of patience? Yesterday it emerged the BBC doctored footage of Donald Trump. We saw the BBC blasted as fake news. Well, today a whistleblower has claimed that the BBC's bias pushed Hamas lies around the world. Can the battered BBC ever recover from this latest scandal? And Dick Cheney, America's most powerful modern vice president and the chief architect of the war on terror, he's died at the age of 84. We're discussing his political legacy throughout the show. The residents of the Chagos Islands have been thrown a dramatic last-minute potential lifeline after a pledge to consult them in the Lords has been pulled. Now, that means that tonight's vote on the Chagos giveaway that was expected to finally surrender the islands to Mauritius is being cancelled at the last minute. Might there be a Chagos miracle before Christmas? Or is that a forlorn hope? And that's all coming up in your next hour. Another great story there from Chris Hope, who just said he is not definitely a forlorn hope. Now, moving on to today's top story, of course, this morning, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in her words, set the context for widely anticipated tax rises in the budget by listing the challenges facing the UK economy. Now, I'm joined in the studio by the Labour MP for Milton Keynes North, that's Chris Curtis, and I'm also joined by our political editor in the studio, Chris Hope. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's start with you, if I could, Chris Hope. A lot of people tuned into that speech this morning. I watched it in its entirety. And the question I said was, what's the point? Because we heard a rolling buffet of excuses. The Tories, Brexit, the pandemic, austerity. Finished off with no real announcements on tax. We were left guessing. We still don't know if there'll be tax announcements, although it does feel now that we're being sweetened up for something painful. I put it to you, what was the point of even doing it?
Well, the point was what they call pitch rolling in our world. They want to prepare the ground for what looks like increases in taxes coming in the budget on November the 26th. It's on the website, the government's website. It is called a scene-setting speech. And that was the idea. For me, it was almost the first third of a budget speech, laying all the groundwork out on why we need to increase taxes. But the final two-thirds, the bits that's going to hurt, we're going to wait for 3 weeks, and the speculation on that starts now. The key line then, and I was in the front row watching it, of course, was when the Chancellor said, if we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort, and that is we are being led to believe that is an indication of increases to taxation in probably one of the big three areas: income tax, VAT, or national insurance. Of those three, national insurance went up for employers last November. VAT would push up food and energy prices, which was singled out today by the Chancellor as being too high. That suggests income tax, maybe a 2p hit on income tax, £6 billion it would raise, and then she's trying to build in some headroom, as they call it, in the world of economics, trying to stop having to come back for more money. But don't forget, a year ago to the CBI, the Chancellor was very, very clear, wasn't she? I'm really clear, she said, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or taxes, where it looks like taxes are what we're seeing shortly.
Okay, let's bring in Labour MP Chris Curtis. Chris, thanks for joining us in
Thank you for having me.
The studio. We will not be raising income tax on working people. We will not be raising national insurance on working people. We will not be raising VAT on working people. This will be a once-in-a-parliament budget. That was the last time round. Now it's looking inevitable. There will be at least some of those tax rises. The only word you can describe this is a complete betrayal of working people.
I don't think that is an entirely fair characterisation. Look, ultimately, when the circumstances change in politics, you have to change your approach. What we're going to see in the run-up to the budget, as Rachel talked about this morning, is the OBR, the organisation that is responsible for working out how much money the country's got and how much money we're going to have in the years ahead. They've looked at what's happened over the last 10 years, and they've gone, actually, we thought that the last 10 years the economy was going to do this well, and actually it's always performed slightly less well than we expected, and therefore going forwards we're expecting the same things to happen. Now, I hope that they're wrong about that, but I can see why they've come to that conclusion, and given they've come to that conclusion, we need to adapt to that, and that is going to mean some difficult decisions in the budget going forward.
Do you think the electorate are going to buy blaming Liz Truss, blaming 14 years of Tories, blaming Brexit, blaming inflation, blaming the pandemic, blaming austerity, blaming Ukraine, blaming anything but themselves?
I'll let other people
take responsibility.
It's not for me to decide who's responsible. When you look at the figures, growth over the last year actually has been pretty impressive compared to what we've seen in recent years, and has beaten forecasts. It's the 9-10 years before that that it hadn't been beating forecasts, and that's why I have a certain level of optimism that maybe despite these difficult OBR numbers, we will be able to beat the numbers going forwards and not be having the difficult conversations that we are having. But I think there is an important point, which is, it's not about blame. It's about when you face certain circumstances, what do you do? And our approach is, look, we know that we need to get the NHS back on its feet. That's got to be a top priority. We know that we can't keep borrowing more and more and more money. We know that the books have to balance. That's a top priority for this government. And that is unfortunately going to mean that we are going to have to raise some taxes in the short term. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at how we spend taxpayers' money far more efficiently. That doesn't mean that we should be looking at all of those measures that are going to be required to get the British economy growing quicker. Many of those things we are doing. But they're going to be hard decisions. When the circumstances change, we change our approach. And I'll just finish on this point, if it's all right. We're not the only ones that have come to that conclusion. If you saw Nigel Farage's speech, actually, it's very rare, I think, for a Labour politician to come on your show and say something nice about Nigel Farage, so let me say something nice. He came out earlier this week and acknowledged that the tax promises he made at the last election are also not deliverable. He made a U-turn, acknowledging that what he said then, because of the changing circumstances, is not deliverable. He U-turned and was honest about that, and I think the British public respect Nigel Farage. When he comes out, he's honest, and he U-turns because he knows that what he promised at the last election, and the circumstances have changed. And I think they also expect us and the Labour Party and Rachel Reeves as the Chancellor to come to spell out exactly what the circumstances are and the way that we're going to approach it and how we're going to approach tax and spend policy as a consequence.
Well, Chris Curtis, something else Nigel Farage said, which you probably won't like. He said that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is spending money like a drunken sailor. And let's talk about the amount of money being spent on public sector pay rises, like 19 billion and rising. Chagos Islands, 30 billion and rising. And yet, whenever there was a murmur of cutting benefits, there was a backbench rebellion. Your party simply won't let you cut money. And in the meantime, you're throwing money around like confetti. The net result is tax rises for those who go to work and benefits booms for those who are out of work.
I do think that we need to go further and faster on cutting back inefficient spending of taxpayers' money. And I will come back to this point. But I do resent the idea that Nigel Farage can go around and say this job's easy. His party now actually has an opportunity to practice what it preaches. It went around and said there's loads of this flabby spending that we can cut in local councils if you give us the reins. Well, we gave them the reins, and now they're coming back in local councils that they run and said, actually, we can't find any of these easy cuts, and now we're going to raise taxes. So I'm not going to take this criticism from Nigel Farage that there's loads of easy cuts to make. Having said that, I do think, given the difficult economic circumstances, that we need to be going further and faster on ensuring that taxpayers' money is spent more efficiently. And I also believe that means, and Rachel said exactly the same thing in her speech this morning, that does mean looking at the welfare system. There is nothing progressive, there is nothing in line with my politics, with so many people in this country being supported by the state and out of work. It's completely out of line.
What does that mean in actual terms? You can't cut $5 billion off the budget back in the summer. What does it mean going further, faster? We heard it from the Chancellor today. I wasn't given a question. I couldn't ask her a question. I wanted to in that press conference. What does that mean going further and faster, Chris?
So my problem with the way we did welfare reform was not that we were being too ambitious by trying to cut the $5 billion. It's that we were being nowhere near ambitious enough. What we actually need is far wider reform of the welfare system, thinking about how we can be looking to actually cut in the long term.
Won't allow it. They bang on about George Osborne-style austerity. It's repellent to your backbenchers. It won't ever go through.
I think the backbench frustration, and it's one that I share, was that it was suddenly thinking about how can we just slash $5 billion today. And right across the political spectrum, there was a level of frustration with that. What we actually need to be thinking about is how can we be much better at getting people and pushing people and incentivising people much greater than the numbers that we were talking about back into work, and that will save orders of magnitude more than we were aiming to save. At the same time, I also think we should be looking at things like the Motability Scheme, where there's effectively tax breaks given for people to be able to buy very expensive luxury cars that I certainly couldn't afford. I don't know if you two could. And I think we need to be looking at systems like that as well. So it's about thinking about wider reform to the system, far more ambitious welfare reform than we were looking at earlier in the year.
Can I get a comment from you, Chris Curtis, on a separate story, and that's the BBC editorial scandal? So the doctoring of the Donald Trump documentary, clearly splicing together the footage to paint an entirely different picture, and today emerging BBC bias to paint Israel as the aggressors at every opportunity and pushing Hamas lies around the world. Will the Labour Party probe the BBC and hold them to account?
I'm sorry to say that I have missed a lot of this story this afternoon, but yes, I think we need to continue to hold the BBC to the highest level of accountability. They should be held to a higher standard. It's, they have the licence fee, they have that privileged position, and it's important they meet their duties when they've done so. At many occasions recently. Glastonbury is an example that it's a news story I have been following. But they fell short of those standards, and it's important that we hold them to account far more.
Superb. Well, thanks, George, in the studio today. Chris Curtis, always a pleasure.
Cheers, thank you very much.
Your company.
I'm sorry I missed the memo on the polka dot ties. I will...
Chris Hope, the fashion police. He always sets the agenda, this one. Thank you very much. That's the Labour MP for Milton Keynes North, Chris Curtis, and also Chris Hope. And moving on to that story, a leaked dossier has accused the BBC's Arabic service of minimising Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The memo says allegations made against Israel were raced to air without adequate checks due to a desire always to believe the worst about Israel. Now, it comes as a report also revealed that the broadcaster doctored a Donald Trump speech by making the US president appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riots when clearly he did nothing of the sort. Well, let's now speak with the political commentator Fahima Mohammed. Fahima, a pleasure to have your show. Let's start on the Donald Trump allegations. Donald Trump, I know, is not somebody you're a huge fan of, but, you know, you can't be doctoring speeches to make a completely different point.
It's not about being a fan or not. I'm quite fair when it comes to these analysis, when it comes to broadcasting, and editing is part of storytelling. And the allegations alone don't equal guilt. The key question is intent and impact. And did the edit material mislead viewers, or did it fairly represent the border truth of Trump's usual rhetoric? Let's be honest, it's not just the BBC, but as the only broadcaster used to bias, if anything, there are major news outlets from CNN to Fox to Channel 4, edits and frame stories to fit a certain narrative or tone. And it doesn't automatically mean that there's a grand conspiracy. It's just how editorial storytelling unfortunately works.
That's the actual findings of the report. The findings of the report say this was pushing an agenda. It didn't do the job of having due impartiality. And you say the BBC's job is to tell stories. No, it's not. It's to tell the truth. And you don't tell the truth by splicing clips together that happened hours apart and showing them in the wrong order. It clearly intimated that Donald Trump revved up the Proud Boys to go and riot, when that didn't happen in the real world.
Well, editing for brevity is standard practice and doesn't prove malicious intent. The fight like hell line reflected Trump's actual rhetoric, so focus was editorially defensible.
But it was an hour later.
Are aware of peacefully line omission did materially mislead. So, I mean, accountability process works when the whistleblower review shows that internal checks functioned. And the isolated error doesn't equal institutional bias across thousands of BBC journalists. And Ofcom punishes systematic deception, not single contextual edits later clarified, which it was.
OK, let's get on to the topic of today's revelations, and that is that the BBC has been accused of minimising Israeli suffering in the Gaza war and painting Israel as an aggressor at every opportunity, whereas bad allegations against Israel have been raced to air. Now, many people have suspected for many, many years the BBC is biased against Israel. This proves them correct.
I've seen different reports which says the actual opposite, and wartime reporting involves uncertainty. Initial missteps don't equal deliberate bias. Remember, Israel is not even allowing journalists into Gaza for any moment in time, even now after a so-called ceasefire. So showing Palestinian suffering aligns with humanitarian, not ideological principles. And the translation as well decision reflects linguistic nuances, not political sympathy. The BBC does face equal criticism from both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian camps, implying balance. So the editorial reviews and retractions demonstrate accountability, not concealment. And the license fee legitimacy is judged on whole network impartiality, not single service output.
OK, well, Fahima Mohammed, the thing about letting Israeli journalists or any journalists into Gaza City, there's a high chance they'd be killed or kidnapped and used as political collateral. There's a very good reason for not allowing civilians to wander around war zones. Not everything is a conspiracy theory. But I want to get back to your notion of accountability and transparency. A lot of critics today of the BBC, Boris Johnson saying this is a total disgrace, Donald Trump Jr. saying that this is fake news. The fake news reports in the UK are just as dishonest and full of as the ones here in America. Cami Badenoch calling it fake news. Heads must roll. And Suella Braverman earlier on in the show in the studio in Westminster said the BBC licence fee should be scrapped.
Look, I'm not a fan of any sort of particular one broadcasting, but I see every broadcaster having their own politics and proving to show their own narrative and rhetoric and sometimes even propaganda. And certain things will be put forward. If this is something that has been breached, then of course investigations should be made and it will be proven. But I don't think in this particular case is anything different to what, for example, Donald Trump is showing, for example, as to what people have also accused the BBC of being more pro-Israel, not just only pro sort of like Hamas, as is claimed in this particular, article or whatever it is. I do see that a lot of the times, majority of, broadcasters will do whatever they can to show the facts, but using their own narrative to put forward whatever reports they want to. They will maximize and minimize. Do whatever they, in whichever angle they want to show.
Fahima, you're very eloquently there defending the BBC's right to paint a picture. Let me paint a picture for you. Just say GB News decided to make a report, I don't know, about a Muslim scholar. And we used a clip from an hour later where it was him saying, we're going to give them hell. And then it showed a picture of a riot that happened 2 hours before he spoke. And we displayed it that way. Would you seriously be saying, oh, everyone's allowed to tell a story? It's just editorialisation? Of course you wouldn't. You'd be clutching your pearls and screaming blue murder.
It's not just also about the issue of what's edited. It's also how people interpret what they see. We all come from the news with our own filters, political, emotional, cultural. So even two people watching the same clip can walk away believing completely different things. It's not just about the bias and broadcasting. It's about the bias within ourselves as audience as well. So again, I do feel that editors routinely shorten speeches and link them with relevant imagery to tell a story. That doesn't automatically equal bias unless intent or effect are clearly misleading. And again, that needs to be investigated if it's found to be that way. And I don't think that in any sort of way that every single sort of broadcaster can claim that they have never done anything similar. And like I said, this is very much in line with Donald Trump's rhetoric anyways, with his language, fight like hell, events that follows can fairly lead to journalists to whether to the violence.
Fahima, as a matter of public record, I can confirm that GB News has never done anything like this, taken a quote an hour later and spliced it together and taken footage from 2 hours before and put it at the end to create a picture, to tell a story. Never, because there are editorial standards and we'd be absolutely fried alive by Ofcom if we did that. But it seems, in your opinion here, nothing to see. It's the BBC.
There's no formal ruling yet, and these are allegations, not confirmed breaches. The BBC may well produce the raw footage and show that edits were within acceptable editorial bounds. And until an independent review concludes otherwise, it's premature to brand this as fake news.
OK. Thanks for joining us on the show, Fahima Mohammed. Always a pleasure to have your diverse take on matters. Thank you. Now, BBC spokesperson told GB News this: while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Michael Prescott is the former advisor to a board committee where differing views and opinions of our coverage are routinely discussed and debated. Now, coming up next, residents of the Chagos Islands have been thrown perhaps a dramatic last-minute lifeline after ministers have paused the legislation over concerns they were going to be defeated in the House of Lords. With me, Martin Daubney, for the 4th month on the bounce, Britain's #1 news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, DC.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline.
Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
I'm going to do now, they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes past 4. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, residents of the Chagos Islands have potentially been thrown a last-minute lifeline after a pledge to consult them in the House of Lords has now been pulled. Now, that means that tonight's vote that was expected to finally surrender the islands to Mauritius, it's now been dramatically cancelled. Here's the question. Might there be a Chagos miracle before Christmas? Or is that perhaps a forlorn dream? Well, to explain this to me now, I'm joined by GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster and also the former special advisor to the Home Office, Christopher Howarth. Christopher, welcome to the show. Chris Hope told me about this story earlier. I got very excited because we've had a load of Chagosians in the studio here hoping for some last-minute drama to try and pull the iron out of the fire. Tell us about it. It's complicated. Try and make it simple for me.
Well, the government's bill to surrender the Chagos Islands has passed the Commons because the government has a large majority. But in the House of Lords, it's a different picture. There are a lot of Liberal Democrats, crossbenchers and Conservatives who together potentially could form a majority to block the bill. So what happened yesterday is the Conservative opposition put down an motion to say that the Chagosians should be consulted before anything happens to their islands, because it obviously affects them in a big way. The government thought they might lose this vote, and so they pulled the whole motion, sent it into committee. So it may pass its second reading, but technically it's going nowhere because it's not going into committee. So it'll be in stasis. It's put on the back burner for now, and it's left the government with a problem. What do? Do they come back for a second attempt, which will also be amended, or do they hopefully rethink the entire thing and decide that surrendering British territory and paying for the privilege was actually a bad idea to start with?
This is the Labour Party. They like to give diverse opinions to all. They like to give the right to reply for oppressed minorities, except, it would appear, the Chagosians.
Except for the British Chagosians, who are the ones who've all the way through this process, are the ones who've had a bad deal. It was their islands, and under this deal, they won't be given the right to resettle. They won't necessarily even have the right to this trust fund that's been set up, because that's all been given to Mauritius. So Mauritius can settle Mauritans there. They might give this trust fund to Mauritans. The British Chagosians, they've not been consulted on this, and their nationality and their islands has been given away sort of under their feet.
So to be absolutely clear, what could have happened is that Chagosians could have stood up in the Lords, addressed the Lords, or their statements would be read out. That could have tugged at the heartstrings of a sufficient number of the peers in there. This could have been voted down. That'd be a nightmare scenario for the Labour Party, and so they've short-circuited that whole process. But here's the problem. It's now in the treacle. It could stay in the Lords for how long? Forever?
Well, at the moment, it's going nowhere, because the process is you have a second read, then it goes to committee where you discussed in detail, but they couldn't get the vote to send it to committee. So at the moment, it's stuck. So what does the government do? They've got a court case going on that the Chagosians have brought, and they've got this problem of trying to get a majority in the Lords. When the Liberal Democrats voted against it in the Commons, there's the Conservatives, obviously the crossbenchers who look at matters of principle sort of with great seriousness, and even some Labour peers are kind of nervous about this. So what do? Can they force these people to vote for the surrender of the Chagos Islands and get it through, or it's a problem for them, but it's a problem of their own making.
Catherine Forster, I shouldn't be too jubilant here because, of course, historically, a lot of people like myself who watch the channel have complained like Billy O about the House of Lords blocking votes in Parliament, particularly over Brexit, where a lot of people said it was a betrayal of the Brexit vote. The Lords became a blocking chamber. But this is something slightly different because the process was to allow the Chagosians to have their say. Labour Party have denied them their say, and it could bite them on the bum.
Yes, and I think this is where the House of Lords proves its worth with this, as with the assisted dying bill, which, of course, was not in the Labour manifesto, was a free vote. And I remember being in the spring at the military base where the Prime Minister made the announcement that they were doing this deal with Mauritius, and it was presented as a done deal. And when you read through the small print on the very first page, it did mention righting historic wrongs. But only that morning, I'd been at the court where there'd been this emergency hearing because two Chagosian ladies had, because of GBNews information, actually launched a last-minute appeal to block it. That was subsequently overturned. But look, the Chagosian people were treated very, very shoddily back in the 60s and 70s when they were booted out. And yet again, here we go. This is about the Chagos Islands. They haven't been consulted. They haven't been involved. Now, the government may have been able to walk this through the Commons, but of course they do not have a majority in the House of Lords. So I think this will give hope to many. And of course, despite all that we heard about Mauritius not being super pally with China, China has welcomed the agreement.
Yes, of course. And
we know that they're going to join the Belt and Road Initiative soon too. So, I think for those hoping that maybe all is not lost, possibly all is not lost.
Chris Howarth, final point to you. A great many people would no doubt never have heard of the Chagos Islands before this deal, before the surrender of sovereignty, as some saw it. You've met a lot of them. We've had a lot of them in the studio, and I've been struck by their resolute spirit, by their patriotism, actually, to King and Queen and country. Prior to that, great many of them have Miss Lee Mandarin, who came here, has fought for the British Army, was prepared to die for the British Army. As far as I'm concerned, they're as British as you. All right. They deserve to have their say. Do you believe in miracles? Could something spectacular happen here?
Well, anything could happen. The treaty is not in force, and these are British Chagosians. They have been. This is a vitally strategic area in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It was kept for a reason. These are British Chagosians, and people may not have heard about it. As it happened, I wrote a book which actually mentioned Chagos before it became famous. But people hadn't heard of it, but that doesn't mean it's vitally important. People hadn't heard of the Falklands War, but they were very keen not to hand it over to Argentina when it came to it. And as for the House of Lords, you raised a very good point. This was not in the Labour Party's manifesto. In fact, the Labour Party's manifesto actually committed them to defending the overseas territories. So it's actually the opposite. They're doing something that was against what they actually promised to do. And in those situations, the Lords, this is really their job. In a situation like that, the Lords really do need to look at it very carefully.
I have a smile on my face, and I wonder if the Chagosians watching this show out there do also have that same smile. Christopher Howard, thank you very much for coming in to see us in the studio today. Pleasure to have your company. Catherine, excellent. I believe you'll be with me. You'll lumber with me until 6 o'clock. Thanks to you both. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 p.m, including shocking new data has shown that a third of British farmers made no money whatsoever last year. Now, an astonishing 51% of all British farmers, they considered walking away from farming just last year. Astonishing data. Will Labour throw them an inheritance tax lifeline, or will they keep ploughing the same old furrow? You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. 4 months on the bounce, Britain's #1 news channel.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's fairly grim out there in places, with some heavy rain coming down for the rest of the day. Blustery and cloudy for many, as well as being very mild for the time of year. We've got low pressure sitting to the southwest, drawing up this brisk but mild southwesterly airflow, and within that airflow we've got a lot of rainfall, especially initially for the southwest into Wales, and then that rain moves through the Midlands into northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, all accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 miles an hour near southwestern coast. But it's not raining everywhere overnight. We will see some drier and clearer weather towards the southeast, where it is mild, but also to the north of Scotland, where it is fairly chilly first thing Wednesday. That's where the best of the sunshine will be, in fact, northern Scotland, but we'll also see some breaks in the cloud through East Anglia and the southeast, 15 Celsius from the word go. Drizzly and damp for the southwest into Wales, but not quite as soggy as Tuesday. The heavier rain by this stage pushing into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, southern Scotland. It's also increasingly cloudy and damp through central Scotland. But like I say, Shetland, Orkney, the far north of the mainland of Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, faring well through Wednesday morning for sunny skies. We will see the skies brighten, though, further south across the Midlands into the south and southeast of England. And as that happens, although it stays breezy, it will feel pleasant with temperatures up to 17 Celsius. Wales and the southwest, though, see a return to some showery rain later, whilst it stays damp for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of northern England. And that's how it looks for bonfire night, a real mixed bag across the UK. The wettest weather likely for much of Scotland, departing Northern Ireland later in the evening, but remaining across northwest England. Drier elsewhere and very mild if you are outdoors looking at bonfire displays.
Thank you, Britain, for sharing over 5 million comments on Your Say, because when you talk, we listen.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Please be advised, the A7 is closed in both directions between Langholm and Howick due to a serious incident. On the M20 westbound between junctions 3 and 1, a mishap has closed 2 of 3 lanes. On the A38 northbound in Staffordshire, congestion affects travel between the A5121 Burton-upon-Trent North and the junction with the A5132, with delays expected until later tonight. In Devon, eastbound on the A38, 1 lane remains closed after a collision. And on the trains, expect major disruptions on both Avanti West Coast and Transpennine Express services between Carlisle and Preston. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 4:34. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, a new report has revealed that a third of British farmers are making absolutely no profit. That's right. According to the McCain Foods Farm Deck survey, 35% of farmers are either breaking even or even running at a loss. Now, this comes as the farming sector faces the end of subsidies and uncertainty over inheritance tax changes. Let's now speak with the beef farmer, James Wright, who joins me on the show. James, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. And may I just say once again, thank you for your work and thank you for keeping Britain fed. You're a beef farmer there in Exmoor, I believe. It really is an astonishing state of affairs to hear that a third of all British farmers simply aren't making a bean.
Yeah, I mean, despite those farmers producing, millions of litres of milk, thousands of tonnes worth of grain, actually, when they get to the end of it, when they get to the end of the year and all said and done, they haven't made any money. And that's tragic because family farms are family farms. These are businesses run by individuals. This isn't some big commercial enterprise that's got years of reserves to fall back on. And these are the businesses that will keep us fed for generations to come, which is why we need them around, which is why we need to support them.
And James Wright, what's causing this? I mean, this report, when it was reported in The Guardian and the BBC, of course, they blame Brexit because a lot of farmers would receive subsidies from the European Union and that didn't happen. We talk all the time, don't we, though, as well, about the fact you're the only industry that doesn't get to set the price of what you sell your goods at. The supermarkets decide what they pay you, and you haven't got a blooming say in the matter.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the supermarkets perform a great role in this country of making sure the consumer is able to access food cheaply and readily available. And that's really important. We need people to be able to afford to eat. But it does mean that you have individual farmers, small family businesses negotiating with very large companies. And that could be seen as a bit of an issue. And on Brexit, yeah, of course, it's a huge issue. A third of farm income used to be government subsidy. But what kind of business, what kind of person wants to rely on government handouts forever? I don't think that's what farmers want. They want to be paid a fair pay for what they produce, and they want the British consumer to love it. So I don't think we need to return back to subsidies. We need to make sure that farmers get paid for what they produce.
Yeah, James Wright, it always just struck me as astonishing anyway that farmers were being paid not to grow anything, to let fat land go fallow for hedgerows, for birds, for insects. I mean, great. But what about putting the bacon on the table? What about putting the beef on the table? What about drive to food sovereignty so we're not reliant on imports and we support the great British farmers?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, but Labour's done away with that scheme as well. So the sustainable farming incentive, which you can apply up to in the spring, is gone. So, and it was meant to come back this month, and it hasn't. I mean, this report is very timely. Baronet Batters, the former NFU president, was asked by Labour to do a report into farming profitability, and she's now given that to the government. Apparently, it's got lots of recommendations in. Hopefully, later this month we'll hear about what their plan is to make sure that farming is productive and profitable. But given their current record, I'm not sure that we should be relying on that. And this data that's come out today is really concerning. The fact that a third of farmers at the end of the year haven't actually earned any money. I've just brought my first cows in behind me, and that means every single day and between now and the spring I'm going to be spending hundreds of pounds each day on diesel, on straw, on silage, and I don't know what I'm going to get paid for it at the end of the year. And there'll be lots of farmers looking at a very long and sad winter at the moment.
Now, James Wright, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. Seeing your cows wander around the background really makes you fancy a steak tonight. Now, I know I'm a bad person, I'm going to hell. But on a serious point, people want diversity of food products, and we hear all the time, do we not, about how difficult it is now for beef farmers in particular, because there also seems to be a prevailing wind against the production of red meat. They're not giving you any help.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it does seem like the vegan bubble has burst. And Martin, if you have a steak tonight, make sure that it's a British one. So make sure you go and find that Union Jack, that red tractor logo. But I mean, veganism does seem to be coming off the boil a bit. It's great to see. People choosing to buy British beef, and the beef price is at the moment the highest it's ever been. So beef and lamb farmers, we've had a good year. It's the dairy farmers who've just lost 8 pence a litre. For the average dairy business, that's £180,000 a year off their income. Wheat farmers, arable farmers, they've had a terrible year. But if you're in beef, it's actually been all right. So,
Superb stuff. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your work there. James Wright, beef farmer in Exmoor. Please keep ploughing on. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Let's get some analysis back in the studio from Catherine Forster. Catherine, we heard last week there could be a glimmer of hope for British farmers. Martin Williams, who's been speaking with government, one of the regulars on this show, is hopeful there could be a tapered down system so smallholders would get relief from inheritance tax while still going after the big landowners, therefore ensuring that the Treasury actually gets more money. But do you think now that the government is just dug in, if you like, and they won't do a similar U-turn on farmers as they did on the winter fuel allowance?
It's hard to tell, but it feels to me like ever since they brought this in, they've just gone no, 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 despite the fact that various groups have come up with all sorts of proposals. The National Farmers Union, Tom Bradshaw has talked to me a lot about this, and they have lots of ideas of ways to raise the money without decimating many family farms. But up until now, certainly, the government does seem to have dug its heels in. I mean, this is something that I used to question Steve Reed when he was Environment Secretary about a lot. So, I mean, we will see, but the Exchequer Secretary, Dan Tomlinson, I think just today has been saying that it is the right decision. And though clearly they do want to hit the big landowners who are just using it as an investment vehicle and land prices going sky high, the government's figures of the numbers of ordinary farmers that it's going to impact are not the same as the NFU's figures. And one thing that I do think is very problematic is the fact that the 7-year rule that you can give, you know, your assets to your family. If you've survived 7 years, you don't pay inheritance tax, which is still intact at the moment. I mean, who knows? But farming is a way of life, isn't it? Very often you've got farmers still farming in their 70s, their 80s, that don't have that option. And I think many of them will think it's very cruel. And we have already had you know, very sadly, some suicides over that.
Don't you think we're desperately failing the farming industry? And I would say, actually, that the whole nation, when you hear a damning statistic, like 51% of all farmers have considered leaving the industry in the past year alone due to the financial strain, the hardship, the fact they're not even making a good day's pay, despite working some of the toughest and uncompromising working conditions in all of British industry. They're putting the work in, they're not getting the payback. It's not just about food. It's not just about sovereignty. It's about the fabric of the nation. We should do more, surely, to protect farmers.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Because we keep hearing about security, national security, energy security, food security, surely is part of that. We know the government is concerned about the environment. Growing food in this country to feed people in this country is surely a really important part of that, rather than shipping things in. But, you know, the proportion of food sufficiency is not that high and hasn't improved. And now we've got a situation, I mean, I was at one in the summer where there's big plans for lots of solar farms that are being built on agricultural land, which perhaps isn't the best use of agricultural land that could be used to grow crops.
I think you're exactly right, Catherine Forster. Thank you very much for your opinion, as ever. Thank you. Now, it's never too early to think about the festive season. And how would you like to have your entire Christmas on us this year? That's right. Us at GB News giving you 40 grand in tax-free moolah to have the Christmas of your dreams. Here's the details you need to be our bumper festive winner.
We're giving you the chance to win your entire Christmas this year paid for by us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash so you can have a brilliant new year. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, the decorations, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. And the best news? You'll get it all in time for for the big day. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 8th of December. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming next, a damning report from the Taxpayers Alliance claims that average Brits cough up an eye-watering, wait for it, £1.3 million in tax over your lifetime. 1.3 million quid. You pay over 160 grand for the NHS and 51 grand for other people's dole money. Take a deep breath. Take a seat. Maybe pour yourself something strong. You're going to need it. First, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here is the forecast of some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're looking to escape the autumnal weather in the UK, well, there is also some unsettled weather through the Mediterranean. The focus in the east and the west at the moment, with Greece seeing some heavy showers, particularly towards the south, and even some longer spells of rain. Italy, though, faring well for sunny skies, likewise for the south of France. But we do have this wet and windy weather sweeping through Portugal on Wednesday, into Spain, and then clearing into eastern Spain during Thursday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's about this project. What are you doing with it, and what are you hoping to achieve?
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Anne. Hope you're well.
Hi. Yes.
I'm partnering with Genesis Care, which is a private healthcare company, and basically following their research, which shared that the number one fear of people who get diagnosed with glioblastoma is that they lose their memories. Now, that's obviously affects me because Tom was my brother, and his 2 points in his life was raising awareness to treatments and the power of positivity. Tom's family were called the Positive Parkers, and we were an extension of the Positive Parkers. So Genesis Care have created this campaign called the Memory Bank, which is an art installation that basically you go to. It was in the Westgate Shopping Centre in Cambridge, and now it's in the Genesis Care Centre.
Just here in the UK, it's about 13,000 people are diagnosed with this sort of primary brain tumour, glioblastoma, as you were saying. Did Tom ever say that was his greatest fear, was losing his memory?
He didn't really. Tom lived in the moment. He never made us feel like he was diagnosed. He was always positive. Even in his worst days, he'd come in with a smile on his face. And what comes to mind is he'd go into an interview like this and say wonderful things about life, like such spiritual, deep messages. And I'd turn to him and I'd say, Tom, that was just phenomenal. And he'll say, like, I've no idea what I just said.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 to 5, and today is day 2 of Prince William's first trip to Brazil, where he's set to announce a new initiative supporting indigenous environmental defenders working to protect the Amazon. It's all part of his wider push to tackle climate change, of course, and protect the planet. Well, let's cross over now to our very own royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's doing the cha-cha-cha there in Rio. Cameron, over to you.
Hi there, Martin. Yeah, welcome to Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro. It's beautiful sun and blue sky here. And this morning we're with the Prince of Wales, not in Rio actually. We're on a tiny island called Phuket, which is like going back in time. It had lots of very old buildings, lots of tuk-tuks going around, and the Prince was going there really to meet the local community. And I kind of assumed there wouldn't be many people there who come out to greet the Prince, considering the engagement was meant to be a secret until he arrived. There were a lot of people from that island who knew exactly who Prince William was, perhaps suggesting, of course, that the royal family still has that global appeal and keeping Brand Britain on the world stage. But as you mentioned, Martin, this afternoon the Prince is expected to deliver what's being described by his aides as a keynote speech, or a major speech really, at the United for Wildlife summit being held alongside his Earthshot Prize. Now, the United for Wildlife, it's something that William set up back in 2013 to tackle the illegal wildlife trade, and it's about getting the private sector, governments, non-profits and charities all working together collaboratively to have an actual impact and actually make a difference by tackling trafficking, animal traffickers and poachers and all the rest of it. And I'm told that what he's announcing today is all about supporting those indigenous leaders on what's been described as the front line of nature conservation. So those who are literally having to poachers and all the rest of it and are losing their lives. I'm told it's something to do with that. So stay tuned later and we'll hopefully bring you that speech line on GB News.
Magnificent stuff there, Cameron Walker. I've got severe job envy from a drizzly London. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, moving on, can you Adam and Eve that the average UK family pays around £1.3 million in tax over a lifetime? That's right, because reports suggest that the Chancellor could be coming for even more, with Rachel Reeves eyeing earners over £46,000. You could be taxed all the way until the grave. Let's now speak with the media campaigns manager at Taxpayers Alliance, William Yarwood. Mr. Yarwood, always a pleasure. These numbers stuck in my craw. 1.3 million quid over a lifetime. It's like a lottery win where we're all the losers. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is our new lifetime tax paper, and you're right. So the average household will be paying £1.3 million in tax over their lifetime, and almost £600,000 of that, Martin, is income tax, which of course is the tax that Rachel Reeves might want to increase during the budget. But actually, one interesting thing about this paper is these stats are actually just from a few years ago. So this doesn't actually take into account the £40 billion of taxes that Rachel Reeves raised last autumn. So actually, this figure could be even higher, but we just don't have those figures quite yet. And another interesting stat for you is basically how we break this down in regards to public spending. So this is a fun one. It would take 2.1 million households' lifetime taxes to pay off our national debt. It would take over 4,000 households' lifetime taxes to pay our yearly asylum system bill cost.
How
right? Over 4,000. Over 4,000 lifetime household taxes. Yep. And the final one is my favourite one. It would take over 11,000 households' lifetime taxes to pay our annual foreign aid budget every single year.
11,000 households work their entire lifetime to shovel money to foreign aid.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what we're saying. And I think that we're talking about this in the context of what Reeves said today, and she's saying that, we all need to contribute a little bit more. We all need to add more to the pot. Well, actually, British taxpayers already are. 1.3 million quid is a decent amount of chunk of change over your lifetime. And actually, Martin, interestingly, we also found that the bottom 20% of taxpayers, they're paying about 17% more in their overall lifetime tax bill than they were in 2021-22.
Can I ask you quickly, if I could, Mr. Yarwood, about wealth taxes?
Sure.
Do they work, or will they simply make the wealthy clear off?
They'll make them clear off. I mean, I was watching your show earlier and I saw the guy from Left Foot Forward or whatever, Turn Left Media, talking about it. And I noticed what he did, he moved the goalposts. As soon as you said they don't work and it's not going to raise any money, they say, actually, this is actually just about reducing inequality. And yeah, you are going to reduce inequality if you make all the wealthy run off. But yeah, they don't work at all.
OK, thank you, William Yard. Always a pleasure, and thanks for coming in, because you were cancelled yesterday by Donald Trump. Still to come, more BBC whistleblowers has claimed that the broadcaster's bias push Hamas lies around the world. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's fairly grim out there in places, with some heavy rain coming down for the rest of the day. Blustery and cloudy for many, as well as being very mild for the time of year. We've got low pressure sitting to the southwest, drawing up this brisk but mild southwesterly airflow, and within that airflow we've got a lot of rainfall, especially initially for the southwest into Wales, and then that rain moves through the Midlands into northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, all accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 miles an hour near southwestern coast. But it's not raining everywhere overnight. We will see some drier and clearer weather towards the southeast, where it is mild, but also to the north of Scotland, where it is fairly chilly first thing Wednesday. That's where the best of the sunshine will be, in fact, northern Scotland, but we'll also see some breaks in the cloud through East Anglia and the southeast, 15 Celsius from the word go. Drizzly and damp for the southwest into Wales, but not quite as soggy as Tuesday. The heavier rain by this stage pushing into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, southern Scotland. It's also increasingly cloudy and damp through central Scotland. But like I say, Shetland, Orkney, the far north of the mainland of Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, faring well through Wednesday morning for sunny skies. We will see the skies brighten, though, further south across the Midlands into the south and southeast of England. And as that happens, although it stays breezy, it will feel pleasant with temperatures up to 17 Celsius. Wales and the southwest, though, see a return to some showery rain later, whilst it stays damp for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of northern England. And that's how it looks for bonfire night, a real mixed bag across the UK. The wettest weather likely for much of Scotland, departing Northern Ireland later in the evening, but remaining across northwest England. Drier elsewhere and very mild if you are outdoors looking at bonfire displays.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you so much for helping us to reach 8 million followers and subscribers across our social media channels. That's 8 million fearless Brits standing up for what really matters.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A7 is closed in both directions between Langholm and Harwich due to a serious incident. Drivers on the M4 westbound should expect congestion from junction 24 Coldra to junction 26 Malpas. In Staffordshire, the A38 northbound is experiencing 30-minute delays. Greater London's M25 anti-clockwise has delays with a breakdown closing one lane. Devon's A38 eastbound has one lane shut due to a collision. And on the trains, expect major disruptions on Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express services between Carlisle and Liverpool Lime Street. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
We're giving you the chance to win your entire Christmas this year paid for by us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes & Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device, and as long as you have an internet connection. Tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's show. With tax rises now seemingly inevitable, today Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, she blamed the Tories. She blamed austerity. She blamed Brexit. She blamed the pandemic. In fact, anybody and anything other than herself or Keir Starmer's government. It's Labour running out of excuses and, on the British public, running out of patience. Yesterday, it emerged that the BBC had doctored footage of Donald Trump, which saw the BBC blasted as fake news. But today it got worse. A whistleblower has claimed that the BBC's bias pushed Hamas lies around the world. Can the battered BBC ever recover from this latest scandal? And shocking new data has shown that a third of British farmers made absolutely no money last year, with an astonishing 51% of all British farmers considering walking away from the industry in this past year alone. Will Labour throw their inheritance tax lifeline, or will it keep on ploughing the same old furrow? And a Liberal Democrat council is under fire after they claim to charge poppy sellers to park for the first time in 30 years. I'll be joined by a local Conservative MP who has blasted this as shameful and deeply unpatriotic. That's all coming up in your next hour. Have you seriously ever heard anything as ridiculous in your entire life as charging poppy sellers to park while they sell poppies? Seriously? Have we become a nation? Now, I know we're a nation now where there are more parking wardens than soldiers, but this has taken the biscuit. People volunteering their time to sell poppies in one council found the council themselves, the Lib Dem council, are saying, actually, we're going to charge you for the privilege of selling poppies. You could not make it up. We'll have that story on the show in the rest of this hour, as well as we'll be joined by Chris Middleton. You remember, he was the author of Freezing This Christmas, last year's surprise, almost #1. He will be joining me on BBC Bias around Donald Trump and Hamas and trans issues, and a sneak insight into what perhaps his #1 entrance could be for this year. Get into us usual ways, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now, hurrah, we've got some news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon. Rachel Reeves has refused to rule out tax rises, saying she'll make the necessary choices in her budget later on this month. It comes amid warnings from the Resolution Foundation that tax rises are inevitable. The OBR is also expected to downgrade its productivity forecast, leaving a £20 billion gap in the public's finances. Speaking from Downing Street, the Chancellor said her statement on the 26th of this month will focus on fairness and opportunity, but she admitted the world has thrown challenges our way.
Mine will be a budget for growth, with fairness at its heart, and a budget that supports businesses to create jobs and to innovate. As I take my decisions on both tax and spend, I will do what is necessary to protect families from high inflation and interest rates, to protect our public services from a return to austerity, and to ensure that the economy that we hand down to future generations is secure, with debt under control.
Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has hit back, claiming Rachel Reeves' speech proves Labour has given up on living within its means.
Chancellor's speech was one long waffle bomb. A laundry list of excuses. She blamed absolutely everybody else for her own choices, her own decisions, her own failures.
Well, GB News has been asking people's thoughts on Rachel Reeves' speech and the upcoming budget.
Complete mess. We need massive overhaul of the system. Starmer has reneged on every promise. He reneged on every promise he made when he was made leader.
The fundamentally correct way to solve the problem is to reduce costs, but the government in power right now can't do that because the electorate just won't let them. So anybody could have really seen this coming.
We know that they're giving away so much money, spending so much money. Every time Labour have been in, we've always ended up bankrupt. I wouldn't trust the government to run a bath. You know, they're totally useless.
I voted Labour. I've always voted Labour. And most of the promises they made to the electorate, they renegated on that. So, yeah, I'm against raising taxes.
In other news, former US Vice President Dick Cheney, the man often described as America's most powerful second-in-command, has died at the age of 84. Cheney, who served under President George W. Bush and helped shape America's response to the 9/11 attacks, was the driving force behind the Iraq War and the broader war on terror. A lifelong Republican, Cheney later broke with his party, branding Donald Trump a coward and the greatest threat to the Republic. Despite surviving 5 heart attacks and a heart transplant in 2012, he remained an influential voice until his death. The BBC has been accused of doctoring a Donald Trump speech to make it appear he encouraged the Capitol Hill riot. An internal memo seen by The Telegraph claims a Panorama episode broadcast a week before the US election completely misled viewers. It showed Donald Trump urging supporters to fight like hell when he actually said to march peacefully and patriotically. The Telegraph says it will publish more allegations of the BBC's bias in its Gaza coverage and censorship on transgender issues. The BBC told GB News it doesn't comment on leaked documents, but said all feedback is taken seriously. London North Eastern Railway has paid tribute to its staff member Zamir Zatouni, who remains in hospital after Saturday's mass stabbings on a train in Cambridgeshire. In a statement, they said, in a moment of crisis, Sam didn't hesitate as he stepped forward to protect those around him. Police are investigating whether the suspect, 32-year-old Anthony Williams, charged with 11 counts of attempted murder, is linked to 3 other knife incidents in Peterborough and London. And in the last few moments, we do have that breaking news that it is presumed they are linked to those 3 other incidents. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has praised police and first responders, while Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood commended the heroic actions of staff, including the train driver Andrew Johnson and, of course, Mr Zatouni. Tommy Robinson has been cleared of a terror offence after refusing to give police his iPhone PIN when stopped at the Channel Tunnel last year. The 42-year-old had been driving to Spain when police demanded access to his iPhone under anti-terror laws. The judge found him not guilty, ruling police acted unlawfully, detaining him under the Terrorism Act. Robinson's defence argued officers targeted him because of his political views, not because of any link to terrorism. And Sir David Beckham has been knighted at Windsor Castle, recognised for his services to sport and charity. The former England captain said he was immensely proud to be honoured in the King's birthday list. Beckham's glittering career saw him win 6 Premier League titles and 2 FA Cups with Manchester United before becoming a global ambassador for British sport. He's also supported humanitarian causes through UNICEF since 2005 and now serves as an ambassador for the King's Foundation. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more in half an hour.
Tatiana, I always enjoy your company. You have no idea how wonderful it is to see your face there. Thank you for doing the news headlines for us. Now, earlier on this morning, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, in her words, set the context for the widely anticipated painful tax rises in the budget by listing the challenges facing the UK economy. Well, to discuss that, I'm joined in the studio by GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, I listened into that speech myself intently. And here's the question. What was the point? It was a rolling buffet of excuses, blaming the Tories, Brexit, the pandemic, austerity, even Reform UK. In the end, we learned nothing new. We didn't know. We were told there will be tax rises, but it had the precipitatory effect of spooking the markets. The pound plummeted to its lowest point since April, a 7-month low. And we still don't know if there will be any tax rises. I put it to you, what was the point of today's speech?
Well, I think the point was to prepare us for bad news. Very unusual for a Chancellor to make a big speech 3 weeks before a budget, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning. And here we go again, because it's just a year since there was that massive tax-rising budget, 40 billion in tax rises. And the Chancellor assured us that she would not need to do that again. And yet here we are, huge speculation that income tax is going to have to go up because, of course, national insurance, income tax and VAT, the taxes that the government had said that they would not touch, make up about 2/3 of the total tax take. So when you go after getting bits of money in different ways, like with the farmers' inheritance tax, you upset huge, small groups of people, but you upset those groups hugely. So I think it's preparing us for bad news. Of course, she was very keen to say Donald Trump's tariffs, war in Ukraine, the Tories, productivity, 14 years of failure under the previous government. I was at a press conference with the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, so I put some of that to her. Let's have a look at what she said.
The Chancellor flung a lot of blame around this morning. A lot of it at the Tories for 14 years. She said that they put political expediency above the national interest. Does she have a point? Because the economy really since the financial crisis has not done well, has it? And also on the BBC, the news that in an internal memo accused the BBC of completely misleading the public over the Trump footage on January the 6th. What action do you think should be taken about that? What would you do if you were in government at the moment? Thank you.
I'm afraid I haven't seen the memo about the BBC, so I can't really answer that question. But it is utterly ridiculous to see Rachel Reeves stand there blaming everybody except herself. Unemployment has risen every single month since Labour came into office, but she wants to blame me for that? That's crazy. She should look at her jobs tax. Look at what she did in the budget. We knew that they were making a mess, and we saw them cheering about how they were going to have a £40 billion tax rate. They thought that they were doing a good thing because no one in that cabinet has ever run a proper business. If we're going to get our country working again, we need people who understand the economy, people who've worked in the private sector, people who've run a business. Rachel Reeves is going to come out playing bingo with all of the lines that she has been practicing for the last few years. That is because she doesn't have a plan. If she had a plan, she'd be talking about what she was going to do other than tax rises. All she is doing is blaming everyone else. This is a Chancellor who's back against the wall. She doesn't know what she's doing. We need to get Britain working again. She should copy and paste our plan. That's the best that she can do right now. So she should take our ideas and run with them at the budget at the end of this month.
So the Leader of the Opposition there saying, take our ideas and run with them. I think it's worth remembering that before the last general election, Rishi Sunak, who was Prime Minister at the time, said, mark my words, Labour will put up your taxes as sure as night is day. Now, before the election, Labour said very limited tax rises, VAT on private school fees, non-DOMs, everything else would come from growth, but it has not worked out like that. It is worth saying, I think, whoever had come into power, it was going to be very, very difficult.
But there haven't been any cuts to spending, and we saw famously where there was that one attempt to cut the benefits bill, there's a backbench rebellion. Nigel Farage has accused Rachel Reeves of spending like a drunken sailor. You can't just keep raising taxes to pay for your follies. How about making some cuts?
Well, they did try, didn't they? The government wanted to cut £5 billion off the welfare bill, which is growing and growing. They couldn't do it because they had a huge rebellion from their own backbenchers in the summer. I think that really quite seriously undermined the Prime Minister's authority, because if enough Labour MPs club together and say, no, we're not going to wear this, it doesn't happen. So it does make it very difficult. And the Stephen Timms review that's been carried out, it sounds like They haven't identified savings in the welfare bill either. But Kemi Badenoch says that the Conservatives have got a plan to cut the welfare budget, and they've identified £47 billion of savings, they say.
Catherine Forster, you've heard the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, you've heard the Prime Minister, but particularly the Chancellor, saying there will be no more increases to income tax. A once-in-a-Parliament budget is how we were sold the last bumper tax raid. No VAT rises, no national insurance rises. As you said, if there was a pointer today, it's softening us up, buttering us up for the inevitable pain. A lot of people will say, if that does happen, it'll be a complete and utter betrayal.
Well, they will. And, of course, this is the government whose poll ratings are on the floor when you consider where they were in July, you know, just over a year ago. I think their inheritance was very difficult, but, you know, they did choose to raise taxes on employers' national insurance. That obviously has had a dampening effect on economic growth. Sure, the economy was growing fastest in the G7 first half of the year, but growth projections are now down. But, of course, the Tories did lay a trap for them because they cut national insurance by 4p before the last election. That was a big, big tax cut. They got no credit for it. They couldn't afford it, but it laid a trap for Labour, who did not want to come in and put those taxes up. But it looks like they're going to have to go up again anyway.
Thank you very much, Catherine Forster, there for that sobering news. Now let's join my next guest. I'd like to speak with the former Conservative aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and that's Leon Emirali. Leon, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. Well, there we go. It's all your fault. It's all the Conservatives' fault. Nothing to do with Rachel Reeves, certainly nothing to do with the Labour government.
It's not just the Conservatives' fault, Martin. I've got a list of all the people that Rachel Reeves decided to blame today. I won't read them all out, but COVID, Ukraine, Brexit, Donald Trump's tariffs, you know, it was anyone but her. And I think that shtick is starting to run a little bit thin with the public, if I'm honest. I think you can get away with blaming the previous administration if you are a couple of months into new government. But I think when we get to this point, when it's, 15, 16 months since Labour came to power, and I think the public are starting to ask the question, well, hang on a minute, where is the growth that you promised during the election campaign? Where is the change that you promised during the election campaign? And I think the public simply want the government to take accountability for their actions. And we haven't seen any of that today from Rachel Reeves during her press conference. And I do think the public are getting a little bit weary of it.
They're also getting a bit wary, I believe, of the fact that there seems to be endless giveaways, I don't know, to the Chagos Islands, to people on benefits, to carbon capture abroad. Endless billions can always be found for Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine. And yet, at home, there seems to be no cuts for people on benefits, for example. I mean, we need to be more prudent. The biscuit tin is empty. We can't keep going for endless giveaways.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think that the government really, let's face it, they have got limited levers when it comes to economic growth. You can really do two things as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You either cut the public spending or you raise taxes. And, you know, it would be a lazy political commentary for me to say, well, Labour always raised taxes, but they have got the option to have made some cuts in a very bloated state. And as you alluded to just a moment ago, you know, they had an opportunity to save tens of billions of that welfare reform that had been proposed, proposed, which I think would have been very popular with the public. But the minute it reached some opposition of those Labour MPs, the Labour Party did a U-turn. And I think had they done that, had they made some of those cuts to the public finances, perhaps the public would have little bit more amenable to tax rises because, you know, we are in a difficult situation. I do have sympathy with Rachel Reeves. It's a tough gig, but you have to make changes across the board. You can't simply put all your eggs in the basket of raising taxes, because what we're going to see is wealthy people, entrepreneurs, risk takers, people who employ people who are productive in the economy, they're going to go elsewhere if they think that they are being hammered because of higher taxes. And I don't necessarily think this is going to be good for the economy long term.
I think you're right. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the bad old days of socialist taxes, wealth taxes back in the 70s. I was just a kid then. And it was a huge brain drain. It took us years to get over it. The Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, they all cleared off. They never came back. They were hounded out of the country. We cannot let history repeat itself. Thanks for your company, superb. Leon Emirali, that's the former Conservative aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Now, it's never too early to think about the festive season. Now, how would you like to have your Christmas completely on us this year? Us at GB News. That's right, 40 grand in tax-free cash to have the Christmas of your dreams. Here's all the details that you need to be our bumper festive winner.
We're giving you the chance to win your entire Christmas this year paid for by us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash so you can have a brilliant new year. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, the decorations, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. And the best news? You'll get it all in time for the big day. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. The winner may be contacted live on GB News, week commencing the 8th of December. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Still to come. Yesterday it emerged that the BBC had doctored footage of Donald Trump. We saw the BBC blasted as fake news by Donald Trump Jr. Today, somehow it got worse. A whistleblower has claimed that the BBC's bias pushed Hamas's lies around the world. Can the battered BBC ever recover from this scandal? I'll speak to an ex-BBC journalist for his take, and that's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. 4 months on the bounce, Britain's #1 news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:24. You have me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a leaked dossier has accused the BBC's Arabic service of minimising Israeli suffering in its coverage of the war in Gaza. The memo says allegations made against Israel were, quotes, raced to air without adequate checks, due to a desire to always believe the worst about Israel. Of course, this comes as a report also revealed that the broadcaster doctored a Donald Trump speech by making the US president appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riots.
What those solutions are.
Well, let's now speak with the former BBC journalist, Chris Middleton. Chris, welcome to the show. I've got another voice in my ear. We'll try and get rid of that. Chris Middleton, welcome to the show. Of course, you're a former BBC journalist, and you got the kibosh when you brought a song out, Freezing This Christmas. What do you make of this latest scandal? Let's start first, if we could, with the BBC incident, the Donald Trump incident.
It's a result of political choices and political decisions. And the good news is we can make different political...
There seems to be quite a lot of it going about. The Donald Trump thing, though, it's even worse than bias, isn't it? Because it's not subtle. It's not just getting something wrong. It's not just misrepresenting something or saying a fact that wasn't quite true or misquoting. It's literally editing something that didn't happen. It's changing reality. It's changing the meaning of something that Donald Trump said to be the exact opposite that he said. I mean, it's not journalism. It's literally the opposite of journalism. If journalism is trying to find out the truth, reporting on the truth, what leaders are saying, what's happening in the world, they've done the exact opposite of that. They've cut together two completely separate clips of the US president 1 week before the US election in order to make it seem like he was trying to incite a riot that had already happened by the time he was giving his speech. I mean, it's crazy. I wrote in my Substack piece today, I said that the BBC has crossed the Rubicon here, because it's not just the normal everyday bias that we see with the BBC. It's quite literally altering reality to fit their narrative.
And Chris Middleton, I spoke with Danny Kelly, a former BBC journalist, on the show yesterday. And when we were talking about the culpability, where the blame might lie, he said, actually, it's not an individual. It's not a news editor. It's not even Tim Davie, the Director General. He said it's an entire cultural mindset at the BBC. They don't like Donald Trump. They're pro-Palestine. They don't like Israel. There is an institutional bias editorially on these quarters. Do you think that's a fair assumption?
I think it is. I mean, that's the only way that these things can slip through the net. You know, if there was someone there who actually had journalistic integrity for finding the truth, then it would be nipped in the bud. You have to have a whole series of chain of command here that all either, like you say, they're so ideologically captured in one direction, whether it's anti-Trump or anti-Israel, that they want to push this narrative that they don't even feel like they're being biased most of the time. They actually think that they're being objective and truthful. That's how biased they are.
Chris Middleton, there's been a huge reaction to this. Donald Trump Jr. said the fake news reporters in the UK are just as dishonest and full of as the ones here in America. Kemi Baynock blasted as a fake news. Heads must roll. Boris Johnson. This is a total disgrace. Nigel Farage. It's no wonder that fewer people are paying the BBC licence fee every single year. Chris Middleton, what needs to be done? Do we need to scrap the BBC licence fee? Do we need to have a total clear out? What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? It is a disgrace. As I say, this really has pushed things beyond anywhere it's ever really been, at least as far as I've seen. Most people are happy to accept that mistakes get made every now and again. You know, journalists aren't perfect. But this is really taken things to another level, where they've purposefully manipulated this through a whole series of chain of command, and nothing's been done about it. No one even thought anything was wrong until this memo has been leaked. So I don't know how you fix it. It's deep, it's institutional rot. Really at the core of the organization. You literally have hundreds of journalists there. And again, I'm not saying they're all doing this in some sort of conspiratorial way. It's just that they all have this same sort of liberal metropolitan mindset, and there's no one there to check and balance each other. So I don't know how really you can get beyond that, beyond scrapping the whole thing and starting from scratch.
I think it's fair to say if you have a hive mind, there's no surprise that in the end they end up getting stung. On a more genteel note, of course, you are known to our viewers for your superb, satirical #1 attempt last Christmas, freezing this Christmas. Now, when I spoke with you earlier on, Chris, you said you have something else planned perhaps for this year. You might give us a sneak insight of your direction of your potential #1 track for this Christmas.
Yes, this is the exclusive for you, Martin. Although I don't want to give too much away too early in case the sort of thought police come down before we get a chance to release it. But I will say this. Last year we took the classic 70s song, Lonely This Christmas. This year we're going with a classic 80s British Christmas song. I won't give away the game of what the song is just yet. But we're going to be raising money for homeless veterans this year. That's what the song is all about. And we're going to be tackling, I would say, what is the biggest issue in the country at the moment.
Chris Middleton, that's wonderful to hear, and it's great to see that you kind of took the excellent initiative last year. You decided to run with it again. Another punt at a Christmas #1. What a great initiative and idea to get behind. Chris Middleton, absolute pleasure to have you on GB News as ever. You take care, my friend. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, a BBC spokesperson has told GB News, while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Michael Prescott is a former advisor to a board committee where differing views and opinions of our coverage are routinely discussed and debated. Quick reaction, if I could, from you, Catherine Forster. You were with Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, earlier on. You put this to her, and she was not happy at all about the BBC's position.
Yeah, so in my sit-down interview with her later, she said it was absolutely shocking. And she said, this is fake news, you know, actually putting together different things to try and make something look different from what it actually is. And I do think heads should roll. Whoever it was that did this should be sacked. At the lobby briefing this afternoon with political journalists, the Prime Minister's official spokesman says that the Prime Minister still has full confidence in Tim Davie, the Director General, but also said that, you know, it is crucial that the BBC upholds the highest standards of impartiality. And the House of Commons Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, is going to meet tomorrow, and the chair of that has said that the allegations are extremely worrying, come at a critical time for the BBC, and that they will be discussing the implications. We're also told that the dossier is with officials at the Department of Culture. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, is also reviewing it.
Superb. Thank you, Catherine Forster. Now, plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show, but for now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, of course, please stay safe. Here is your traffic and your travel update, and please stick with us.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. The A7 is closed between Langholm and Harwich due to an incident. An accident on the A48 near Landerog causes disruptions. Delays on the M1 southbound in Leeds occur between junctions 46 and 45 due to broken down vehicles. The M1 northbound exit slip lane in Derbyshire is closed at junction 25. Staffordshire's A38 northbound faces 30-minute congestion. Major lane closures exist on the M20 westbound in Kent between junctions 3 and 1. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express report significant disruptions between Carlisle and Preston. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
The top Top stories from the GB newsroom this hour. Rachel Reeves isn't ruling out tax rises, saying she'll make the necessary choices in her budget later this month. It comes as the Resolution Foundation warns tax hikes are inevitable, and the OBR prepares to slash its productivity forecast, leaving a £20 billion black hole. Tommy Robinson has been cleared of a terror offence after refusing to hand over his phone pin at the Channel Tunnel. A judge ruled police acted unlawfully when they detained him under the Terrorism Act, saying officers targeted him for his politics, not extremism. The BBC is facing claims it doctored Donald Trump's speech to make it sound like he encouraged the Capitol Hill riot. An internal memo seen by The Telegraph says a Panorama episode completely misled viewers. The BBC says it doesn't comment on leaks but insists all feedback is taken seriously. And the former US Vice President Dick Cheney, described as America's most powerful second-in-command, has died at the age of 84. Those are the headlines for now. More from me at 6 o'clock.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's fairly grim out there in places with some heavy rain coming down for the rest of the day. Blustery and cloudy for many, as well as being very mild for the time of year. We've got low pressure sitting to the southwest, drawing up this brisk but mild southwesterly airflow, and within that airflow we've got a lot of rainfall, especially initially for the southwest into Wales, and then that rain moves through the Midlands into northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland overnight, all accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 miles an hour near southwestern coast. But it's not raining everywhere overnight. We will see some drier and clearer weather towards the southeast where it is mild, but also to the north of Scotland where it is fairly chilly first thing Wednesday. That's where the best of the sunshine will be, in fact, northern Scotland, but we'll also see some breaks in the cloud through East Anglia and the southeast, 15 Celsius from the word go. Drizzly and damp for the southwest into Wales, but not quite as soggy as Tuesday. The heavier rain by this stage pushing into Northern Ireland, parts of northern England, southern Scotland. It's also increasingly cloudy and damp through central Scotland. But like I say, Shetland, Orkney, the far north of the mainland of Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, faring well through Wednesday morning for sunny skies. We will see the skies brighten though further south across the Midlands into the south and southeast of England, and as that happens, although it stays breezy, it will feel pleasant with temperatures up to 17 Celsius. Wales and the southwest though see a return to some showery rain later, whilst it stays damp for Scotland, Northern Ireland into much of northern England. And that's how it looks for bonfire night, a real mixed bag across the UK. The wettest weather likely for much of Scotland, departing Northern Ireland later in the evening, but remaining across northwest England. Drier elsewhere and very mild if you are outdoors looking at bonfire displays.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Invest in climate.
Welcome back. Time's 5:37. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, I've got some breaking news for you now, and it's this. The 14-year-old who was sexually assaulted by the Ethiopian small boat's migrant Hadush Kabatu and her father have issued new statements following the news that the sex offender was released, recaptured, and then paid £500 of taxpayers' money upon his deportation. And the 14-year-old said this: I think it's disgusting how me and my family have been treated in all of this, and it's not fair. that he was released by accident, and I feel like I was put in danger all over again. And all the feelings from that day came back, and we found out he was being deported. I was being told by everyone that he got paid £500, and when I got home, I just cried because I felt like he got paid for what he had done to me.
That probably is the only thing.
Meanwhile, her father has revealed his visit to HMP Chelmsford after the news that Kabatu had been released, claiming he was treated disrespectfully by staff, shushed, and even threatened with the call to security. Now, both statements will be read out in full by the official family spokesman at 7 p.m. tonight, exclusively on Nigel Farrader's programme. You'll not want to miss it. Now, meanwhile, a Liberal Democrats-run council has been accused of being anti-veteran by the local MP after it started charging poppy sellers to use a car park for the first time in 30 years. Now, Chichester District Council is implementing a £2.40 per vehicle fee per day per vehicle for the 3 Saturdays up until Remembrance Weekend for those raising money for the Royal British Legion and fallen veterans. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by Andrew Griffith MP, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Arundel and South Downs. Mr Griffith, welcome to the show. This took my breath away when I heard it earlier on. Talk about penny pinching in council town halls. This takes the biscuit.
It doesn't get much worse than that. You're absolutely right. And thank you to GB News for breaking this story nationally. This is a council, a Lib Dem-led council. Historically, these vehicles have been a big part of poppy selling, that moment of remembrance. These are historical vehicles maintained by volunteers. They come to historic Petworth Town Centre as a real feature in the run-up to Remembrance Sunday when we remember our veterans. And it doesn't get more penny pinching than this. Not just is it an insult, you know, it's a small amount of money accepted, but it's just an insult to our history and our heritage. And I wonder whether there's something more behind this, because this is also a Lib Dem council that has imposed Sunday parking charges for the first time. You think about Sundays, people come there, sometimes they come to worship, they want to stay in the car park for a while, have a cup of coffee afterwards. So it's an attack on our heritage, an attack on our values, and for what purpose, Martin? Because the council could just make this go away today. They could say, look, you can have the 6 bays to park your historic vehicles you've always put there. We'll waive the parking charges. Good luck to people selling poppies, raising money for our veterans.
30 years the fee has been waived, which is the right thing to do. The total amount for 6 military vehicles, which until this moment have never faced a penny in charges, is £24.60. And that money will have to come out of the poppy donations given by the great British public to pay the Liberal Democrat Council. That can't be right.
No, it's your worst example of a sort of woke town hall. What will they do with that money? You know, pay their pensions or whatever. It just sends really the wrong signal. Whose side are they on? This is popular with local people, to the best of my knowledge. Nobody has ever complained. Certainly no one's ever raised it with me as anything other than a delightful feature celebrating our history, our culture, and that moment of remembrance for our veterans coming up over this weekend. So I ask, and I've written to the local councillor, Harsha Tizai, who's responsible for parking. She's the one that introduced Sunday parking charges as well. I've written to her, even at this late stage, look, just reverse this decision. It's not a lot of money, but it means a lot, and a lot of your viewers will be sitting there thinking, why on earth would a council not be wanting to get behind our veterans at a time of Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day?
Andrew Griffiths, quite aside from this particular council in Chichester, could I broaden this out to a seeming reluctance or even a sense of shame from certain councils around the country in our flag, the St George's flag, the Union flag? A lot of councils seem to be taking them down, calling them divisive. When did this rot start, this shame in our beautiful national flags?
Look, I fear it's always been there amongst a certain part of often the public sector community. They're not proud of our history, our heritage. I'm very proud of our history. You know, net, we've made a wonderful contribution to the world, dating right back to being one of the first countries in the world to eliminate slavery across large parts of the Commonwealth. I've sponsored a local flag. I'm a big fan of the Union Jack. I think that brings us together. It's our genuine national flag. Your own channel is broadcast broadcast. We'll see a wonderful array of Union Jacks this weekend, just outside a Remembrance Sunday down at the Cenotaph. So I ran my own competition. I'm proud that people are flying the Union Jack. And it's just greatly troubling when people are very keen to fly all sorts of different rainbow flags, but they're not proud to fly the flag that they really should be flying, which is our Union Jack on our civic buildings.
Andrew Griffiths, as I have you here, can I get some reaction to you from a story we've been covering today, and that's this BBC story. Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, said heads must roll at the BBC for doctoring the Donald Trump footage and for seemingly promoting pro-Hamas propaganda on the BBC. What's your take on this outrageous situation?
I haven't seen all of it. I've been in the chamber today. We've been talking. We just had a big debate. Everyone across the road talking about saving our high streets, and there's something called the Employment Rights Bill that's going to drive a lot of unemployment that I've been fighting. But look, clearly, you know, one of the issues is you've got the BBC putting itself on its pedestal, something called BBC Verify, a lot of licence fee payers' money, resources going into that, and ironically, time after time, finding the BBC's the one at fault, whether it's listening too uncritically to voices sometimes in the Middle East, or apparently this story about apparently doctoring a video. You know, I was once upon a time in broadcasting, not on the editorial side, but I remember just how important it is and how quickly the regulator would be to crack down if there's any sort of suggestions that a media outlet hasn't portrayed the truth. So I don't know enough about the details, but clearly it's a very serious matter.
Andrew Griffith, can I finally get your take on the announcement today, seemingly, inevitably now, there will be tax rises by Rachel Reeves at the budget, when that was made resolutely clear that would never happen. Is this a complete betrayal?
It is a complete betrayal. It's really damaging because not only have we had the longest run into a budget, we now have effectively confirmation that she's going to break the promise, or she lied when she said a year ago, I'm not coming back for more. The public sector need to balance its books. No more borrowing, no more taxes. And today we got diametrically the opposite. And I just feel for businesses, in particular, and the Shadow Business Secretary, businesses across the country, desperately trying to balance their books, trying to get confidence in the economy when people aren't hiring, they're not investing, the housing market is moribund. We're going into Christmas. This is a huge moment in the year for most businesses, and all the chances contributing to this is more undermining of confidence, more making people feel in this great country of ours that they're going to have their money taken from them.
OK, thank you very much for joining us, Andrew Griffith. Thanks for that superb exclusive story. And a spokesperson for Chichester District Council told GB News this. In previous years, we have provided space in the Pell Street car park to support fundraising efforts and remain committed to facilitating this. This year, we received a request to use the car park on 3 consecutive Saturdays for a display of 6 military vehicles. Well, unfortunately, we are unable to accommodate all 6 vehicles due to space. We therefore suggested the 3 large vehicle base could be used for the 3 large military vehicles with the daily parking charge for a standard vehicle to be made for each vehicle. And they still went on to say more. They added this: under normal circumstances, an event organiser will be expected to contribute to the council's costs to enable the events to take place, including signage, staff time and licence preparation. And still it goes on. We always offered, at no charge, space for a table or individual to sell poppies, should the organisers wish to proceed in that way. We're going to be here till Christmas. We remain committed to supporting the poppy appeal and will always offer assistance wherever it is possible for us to do so. Thanks for searching some holiday sun. Here's the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're looking to escape the autumnal weather in the UK, well, there is also some unsettled weather through the Mediterranean. The focus in the east and the west at the moment, with Greece seeing some heavy showers, particularly towards the south, and even some longer spells of rain. Italy, though, faring well for sunny skies, likewise for the south of France. But we do have this wet and windy weather sweeping through Portugal on Wednesday, into Spain, and then clearing into eastern Spain during Thursday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock, only on GB News.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
We have a very interesting guy in the studio called Will Whitehorn, who's a space expert. And the reason we've got Will in is that NASA have plans to send astronauts to live on the moon. And
It's not how you think, though, is it? It's inside glass bubbles that are going to be made from lunar dust.
OK.
Not in houses.
The American Space Agency is funding research to see if it is possible. And let's get Will, who does believe it's possible. And will you be going, Will?
Well, not to the moon, obviously.
No.
That's going to be a bit expensive. But and I think NASA will be sending astronauts who probably had to train for several years. But I do intend to go to space in the next couple of years, yes.
So how's it going to work? So NASA's unveiling this plan to send astronauts to live on the moon, living in glass bubbles.
Yeah, made of basically moon dust. So there's a huge amount of silica and other similar materials on the moon. And basically using a microwave process, like a microwave oven, of a very sophisticated type, they're going to be able to meld those and construct, and also using 3D, technology, they'll also be able to construct the interiors on the moon. Now, that's because rocketry is expensive, so it's very expensive to take them up.
So it's not that you fill a big space container and bring it to the moon full of this stuff and then assemble it there. You're actually going to fabricate it, make it on the lunar surface.
That's one of NASA's plans. So the first mission going back shortly, in which Elon Musk will be involved with the new Starship rocket that you've probably seen. The Starship is the biggest rocket ever built in human history. And that's going to be able to also go to Mars. But it's also going to be able to carry industrial material to space.
Right. GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
10:06, got some breaking news for you now. It's in the USA. The Federal Aviation Administration has issued a ground stop for traffic at Reagan Washington National Airport over a security issue. Flight Radar 24 and a flight tracking site said the issue was due to unconfirmed threats against a United Airlines airplane that had been moved away from other aircraft at the airport. More on that breaking news story throughout the rest of the evening. But back now to domestic affairs, and at London's last remaining Greyhound Stadium, punters and staff are sounding the alarm. Proposed hikes in online betting taxes could decimate the sport they warn, from shops shutting to sponsorship drying up. The race to the dogs, they say, may be even more than a metaphor if the government presses on. Let's now speak with the Chief Executive of the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, Mark Bird. Mark, welcome to the show. Your industry is seriously going to go to the dogs if Labour press on.
Yes, Martin, and we will excuse the metaphor. I mean, this is a real and present danger for us in terms of, I mean, even today, the Minister was tackled by Jack Rankin MP in the House, asking whether or not horse racing and greyhound racing would be distinct from this tax. The problem we have is that, realistically, the Minister said that they are trying to ensure that there are no unintended consequences with these tax proposals. But the reality is, as you've heard probably from bookmakers, is that with this tax, there is a real likelihood that the LBOs, licensed betting officers, will close. And for that to happen will have a significant detrimental effect to the way in which we are funded in this sport. Most of the money that comes in is from bookmakers, is paid on a voluntary levy, unlike horse racing, which is statutory. But all that money effectively goes into the welfare and care of the greyhounds that you see racing around these tracks, including the one in London.
And Mark Bird, part of a rich part of British heritage. There were once 33 tracks inside the M25. Now it's down to just Romford.
It is, but there are still 19 tracks, and a new track has just recently opened up in Birmingham. So in terms of what it provides to the economy of the country, it's still a big deal. I mean, Lisa Landy earlier this year said that the contribution from greyhound racing into the UK economy is substantial. So we really would ask the government to look at the unintended consequences of what they're planning to do with these proposals.
I think you're absolutely right, because they just can't seem to grasp that real businesses with real overheads, it's not the same as a website with an office. You need a break, and you need it fast. Mark Bird, thank you very much for joining us on the show. A short blast, we have to move on. Chief Executive of the Greyhound Board of Great Britain. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, Mark Bird. Now, of course, up next is Jubes & Co. But before we go to Jubes, let me quickly get Catherine Forster's reaction. Catherine Forster, this U-turn by the Labour Party on taxation, it could haunt them at the next election.
Well, it certainly could, but the problem that they have is they need to raise a lot of money, tens of billions. We saw what happened last time, where they went after small groups like the farmers. And because income tax, national insurance and VAT raised 2/3 of the total tax that the government has, it's very difficult for them to avoid it. So it's possible they're floating tax and it's not going to happen. But
Catherine, I need to interrupt because we've got some breaking news. There's been an United Airlines airplane grounded in America. We're joined by GBNews presenter Ben Leo, who is stuck on the tarmac in Florida. Ben, what's going on?
Hello, Martin. Bit of an impromptu visit. Yes, we're on the tarmac at Orlando in Florida. I was just heading back. There you go, packed plane. Heading back to Washington, D.C. to rejoin Bev Turner for the Late Show Live a bit later today. We were stuck for about an hour. The captain came on the intercom and said we had a ground stop. So a ground stop, basically, I've just learned this in the last 15 minutes. A ground stop is where air traffic control order a plane to not take off. Anyway, long story short, we've been sat on the tarmac, and it turns out there is a bomb threat against a United Airlines flight at Reagan International Airport in DC, where I was heading just now. And the plane currently, according to CNN, from the last couple of minutes, is sat on the tarmac at Reagan whilst they'll deal with this security threat. So as far as we're concerned here, all flights from Orlando, at least, to Washington Reagan have been grounded. I think we're being kicked off. I'm not sure if the signal is very good, but we're just being kicked off now on the flight. So Bev Turner may have to go solo tonight on the Late Show Live. But yeah, the breaking news, Martin, is there's a serious bomb threat against the United Airlines flight at Washington Reagan International Airport. I'm on the tarmac at Orlando. I've been stuck here for an hour. Hopefully we're getting kicked off soon. But yeah, developing story in Washington.
And have you been given any information at all, other than the fact that the bomb threat, this of course will have a huge knock-on effect on all of US airspace?
Yeah, so at the moment, I mean, it's not even the captain of this flight I'm on now who's revealed that information. I've just found it from Reuters, the news agency, online on my phone. The captain this end has just said there's a ground stop for this flight only. I've gone on Flight Radar, Flight Tracker, the air tracking system, and all flights to Reagan have been suspended. So if you look at the flight activity around Washington Reagan International, there'll be no planes taking off or landing at the moment. And that United flight, which is subject to this bomb threat, is sat on the tarmac still now while security services evaluate.
Thank you, Ben Leo, there for joining us live on the tarmac in Florida. You stay safe. And up next is Jubes & Co. 6 p.m. Jubes & Co. That's next. I'll be back 3 p.m. tomorrow. In the meantime, have a fantastic evening.
Thank you, Britain, for making us the fastest growing news website in the UK. We're truly humbled, and we couldn't have done it without you.